Welcome to your in-depth astrology overview and zodiac forecast for December 2024. I'm going to share with you some standout details to look out for. Then on screen, the event chart right at the start of the month, always influential, providing a backdrop for the whole month. We have a black moon this month, which is incredibly exciting. But also I'm going to go through each of the big developments, and there are a lot this December, a lot of exciting information to share you. Please stay with me, then I'll go through each of the 12 signs, from Aries through to Pisces, to give you a flavour of what you can expect in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. Thank you for joining me. If you're new here, this is very much a community. If you have any thoughts, please do share them. About 50% of people who regularly enjoy my videos are not subscribers. If that's you, please help the channel to thrive. Click that sub button, but also the bell notification symbol. If you'd like to work with me personally to discover what your prospects are in the coming year, I am a consultant astrologer. Please check out my testimonials below. I don't edit these, I share them as is. If you'd like to order your personal reports for next year, based on your unique birth data, I'll also give you a free gift of your Indian, Chinese, general and love zodiac forecast. But you also get your life roadmap report. The combination of all this information will give you so much to guide you, but the personal horoscopes are totally unique to each person they're produced for. Please see the link below for more, and there's 30% off too. And if you order in 2024, you get the rest of this year free too. So a few standout details to share with you. 2 new moons this month, therefore a black moon, the 1st and the 30th. The first is in the go-getting Sagittarius, the second in the more conservative sign of Capricorn. But we're also seeing some big turnarounds this month. We start this month with Mercury in a retrograde, but it is going to meet the Sun on the 6th, a GEMINI. I'll tell you about that. It's known as an inferior conjunction. But Mars on the same day slams on the celestial brakes in Leo. And broadly, all this month, Mars is face to face with Pluto. But it also goes face to face with Venus. From the 7th onwards, Venus is in Aquarius. Venus forges an incredibly powerful conjunction with Pluto. What does that mean? The sign of Aquarius is very much about us collectively. Venus can be about relationships, of course. The sign of Aquarius about friendships, but also Venus can be about money. Now Neptune goes direct on the 7th. Did you know that Neptune spends about 42% of each year retracing its steps? Now Neptune can be about dreams, it can be about imagination and compassion, but it can be about confusion. And you know, Saturn and Neptune are applying in very potent ways. Saturn to the new moon on the 1st, and Neptune to the full moon, which occurs on the 15th. And I need to explain why that can be quite tricky. Also, week 3 sees Neptune in a square with the Sun beyond that full moon, but Mercury does go direct on the 15th, so that could be helpful. But on the 21st, we do see the winter solstice, a critical date in the Western tropical calendar because it ushers in cardinal quadrant 4, the last of the year. This provides a backdrop energy through to the 20th of March next year when we get cardinal quadrant 1, because Western tropical is predicated on the seasons. Now, the winter solstice also sees the Sun climb to the top of the chart in the sign of Capricorn, which is very much about traditionality and more conservative aspirations. It's to do with our material culmination, but it does clash with the nodal T-square. What's the significance of that? Also, as the month comes to a close, as Mars rewinds, it meets the advancing Pluto. But on the 24th, on Christmas Eve, Jupiter and Saturn reach an exact square. The last time this occurred was on the 19th of August. We're going to get another one next year on the 15th of June, but it won't be between these two signs. So Jupiter in Gemini, in retrograde as we begin this month, is in opposition to Mercury in detriment in Gemini in retrograde, and both are being broadly T-squared by Saturn. What's the significance of that? But once Jupiter and Saturn themselves tighten up into that exact square on Christmas Eve, that's a very telling moment for us all collectively. However, on the 29th, Chiron, the so-called wounded healer, does go direct. But there's a new moon, that's the black moon, on the 30th in Capricorn, which will provide a backdrop for the first month as we go into the new year. So those are just some broader details to share with you. On the screen now is the event chart right at the start of the month. And you can see the moon is not quite applied to the sun. So it's at 6 degrees and 15. It's got 3 degrees to go before it meets up with the sun and creates the new moon on the 1st of December. Sagittarius new moons are a great opportunity to set our intentions about travel, higher education, broadening our horizons, being perhaps a little bit more adventurous or independent. What's not to like? Also Mars, you can see down in Leo, applies. Okay, it's a little bit broad. It's about a 4-degree trine, so that brings some more fire energy to the equation. But as I mentioned in the introduction, you can see that Mercury in the sign of Sagittarius is retrograde, and it is opposite Jupiter, both in homes that they're not at their best in. So if we flip them, they both be dignified. Now, some astrologers would claim there's still a mutual receptivity. What I would say is that if we look at the position of Saturn broadly T-squares both those positions. So the sign of Sagittarius and that new moon can also be about philosophies, can be about the rule of law, can be about people having their voices heard or wanting to have their voices heard, but it can also be about dogma, and it can also be in some ways a little bit of a might is right energy. The thing with Saturn and Neptune in the sign of Pisces, they're asking us to think about what the outcomes are, because Saturn is about karma, and so it's okay thinking in the moment and being much more on the front foot and very dashing and buccaneering, which is all very Sagittarius energy, but there are going to be some potential outcomes. And also, if the exchange of ideas between Jupiter, the ruler of Sagittarius, in the sign of Gemini, where it can say things quickly, to be honest, rationally, not always things that are based on facts, more on opinions, with that opposition to Mercury, what Saturn and Neptune may be doing as this month goes on is slowly but surely pushing into the open the reality of some statements and some claims and testing them, and we will find out more. There's going to be more stuff coming into the open. But Venus, the planet of relation, but also of money, is in the sign of Capricorn at the start of this month. Here Venus asks us to appreciate those long-standing connections we have a respect for our colleagues, perhaps even apply a degree of charm and decorum and old-fashioned good manners to all sorts of situations. But that is in a very positive angle with the more radical Uranus. Around relationships, it's possible that we're being pushed there to think afresh, or perhaps think afresh about how we use our resources. Because this is a month that often we like to do our best for those that we care for, that could see us being perhaps a little bit more open to some different ways of buying or presenting or wrapping the type of gifts that we can give the loved ones we have. But the sign of Sagittarius can big things up. The sign of Pisces just asks us to think about the emotional, spiritual and psychological outcome from that. So that's where we are at the start of the month. But We also have, through week 1, Venus continuing to connect to Uranus, and we also have, at the end of week 1, that GEMINI. So what is an inferior conjunction? Well, when Mercury's in retrograde, Mercury's this side of the Sun. So it's in between the Sun and the Earth. So the amplification of the Sun's rays into the energy of Mercury is very strong. We just need to be conscious that if we make claims, we need to be able to stand them up. Because of Mercury's tendency in Sagittarius to be very optimistic to the point of not really fact-checking things, being a bit quick, a bit careless, not wanting to grapple with the precision and small details that Mercury's rulership of Virgo encourages us to be mindful of. Now Mars goes through a retrograde every couple of years. It starts that retrograde also on the 6th in Leo. But there's no doubt about it, Mars in Leo is very charismatic, and perhaps we're just being asked to turn the music down a little bit with this retrograde, but he is going to be inverting back into the sign of Cancer on the 6th of January. In fact, in total, Mars through this retrograde is going to be in Cancer for 24 weeks and in Leo for 18 weeks. Now it will return back into Leo on the 18th of April, and it will be there through to the 17th of June. So we are going to get that glow up from Mars in Leo more next year, but things could just slow down a little bit, particularly if we've been trying something that's a bit more daring and emphasising our individual talents. But on the 7th, Neptune goes direct, and Neptune went into its retrograde on July the 2nd. So the fact that that comes to an end, I think, is something we can welcome. But also Venus makes its move into the sign of Aquarius. So for a few days before that, Venus is starting to apply to Pluto. Then that becomes absolutely exact. So it's from about the 5th through to the 10th. I think this is particularly interesting. Venus can be, of course, about money, but of course in Aquarius can be about a fellowship. It can be about how we connect, all of us. So if we can celebrate our alliances, or we're thinking about relationships for the long term, or we want to join some kind of new cause or group or local activity where we can use our generosity of spirit and warmth of nature in order to help others. So that's a lovely combination. But of course the sign of Aquarius can also be a little bit detached. But the truth, Pluto, could be teased out in a relationship that maybe has been a bit opaque, and because of the initial exciting energy between Venus and Uranus at the start of this month, if there has been someone who's come into our world who's really caught our imagination, we could start to scrutinise that relationship a little more carefully. There could be some power battles, to be honest, from the 10th to the 15th as Venus goes opposite the retreating Mars, particularly if you've got a tie where someone's much more about what we can achieve and the other person's a bit more invested in what they want out of it as an individual. But if you are someone who's very social and you are a free spirit, you could end up having a clinch under the mistletoe, perhaps with more than one person in your social circle, and it could be a very jolly time. But the 15th sees the full moon in the sign of Gemini. Now Gemini full moon is an interesting one if we think about it, because Gemini is an air sign, it's very logical, can be a little bit changeable, and it's squaring up by 3 degrees the position of Neptune, whilst on the same day Mercury ends its retrograde, which began in Sagittarius on the 26th of November, but of course it doesn't end its post-retrograde shadow. That goes on through to the early part of January too, through to the 3rd. So the potential for confusion around what's claimed or what people say is very strong indeed, and that energy from that full moon, remember, will provide a backdrop for the last 2 weeks of this year. So if we're meeting up with friends and folks at Christmas time, and there seems to be some confusion over who said or claimed what, or what the arrangements were, it wouldn't really be a surprise, because I feel that fact and logic could be sacrificed on the altar of people's unreality in a way, with Neptune in the 12th house applying so tightly to that particular full moon. But of course, Jupiter and Saturn are broadly in square for the whole of this month. If you recall, on the 19th of August, they came into their square. The last time they were conjunct was in 2020, which happens about every 20 years. So the square is when, because obviously they've got completely different journeys, Jupiter whips through each sign usually every 12 months. Of course, we've had a couple of years where that pattern didn't quite work like that, but Saturn is obviously much more systematic and much more to do with the 29.5-year journey. So when they align, it's because they've got very different patterns. It's quite rare. So the square, let's think about it. Saturn is about the rulership of time. Its Greek name was Chronos, so chronology, and Saturn in Pisces is outcomes. It's the end of its journey. So if we think what we began upon collectively about 28 years ago, as Saturn gets to the end of its journey in Pisces at the start of 26 fully, because it does move into Aries for 3 months in 2025. And please check out my Saturn in 2025 deep dive special video by clicking on the link within this video. But just be aware that as these two square, Jupiter in its retrograde in Gemini is all about those quick claims, but not necessarily substantiated. So there could be some real scrutiny that comes up on Christmas Eve. Could be some information that comes into the open that could provide some surprises to some and perhaps not to others. But the 21st, a really important event, as I mentioned before, of the whole year. And the following 13 weeks is a chance for us all to think about property issues, our work, our ambition, our goals, but also the more material world. How are things panning out? We are seeing the cost of COVID and also the cost of the war in the Ukraine has had a crippling impact on the cost of living, and we're all trying to make sense of this. But there's another bigger picture here, because the sign of Capricorn, which the Sun moves into on the 21st, is to do with tradition. But since July 13, 2023, the North Node has been urging us, along with the eclipse series in Aries, to get in touch with what we want as individuals. And because this winter solstice T-squares the nodal axis, we are going to see some reactions to perhaps the more conservative agenda that does seem to be developing in the US. But we are also going to see Chiron going direct on the 29th. If we're trying to make sense of all of this, that will obviously help. The new moon, the black moon in Capricorn on the 30th, definitely a chance to set our intentions for what we want in terms of our goals for the new year. But because Mars and Pluto, because Mars is going through that retrograde from the 6th, that's getting back into an almost direct confrontation with Pluto, which will peak on the 3rd of January. Might is right comes to mind, and of course Mars in retrograde can create frustration, it can create a more triggering energy. If we don't feel heard, people can be more exasperated. Pluto in Aquarius is working its way into our lives in some ways manners that we won't necessarily all totally fully understand because of the pace. There will be people working on different technologies around the world whilst we're sleeping, that things are just rattling along. But there could be a tension between those different energies. So some people will want to use the more traditional energies of Aquarius to slow down the pace of change, to at least understand what it's going to mean. Other people will want to embrace it, perhaps in a very hedonistic way, and just say, well, look, this is inevitable, we're going to do this. And that's going to be quite a theme that I feel will play out through 2025, because we are going to have the clash between Mars and Pluto twice throughout the year, but because of the broad connection of the orb, it's still going to be hovering around at times, particularly when, of course, Mars goes back into Leo on the 18th of April. So that gives you an overview of what this month is about. Please stay with me as I go through each of the signs from Aries through to Pisces. People have been asking me, what do I watch? If you know your natal chart well, definitely watch the ascendant, because you'll know where your cusps are. Whatever you use, whether you use a proportional house system like PISCES, or you use whole house or equal sign, you'll know where your cusps are. If you're not so sure on your astrology, you'll never go wrong with the sun, because it's the core of who you are. If you want to relate to it in terms of your moon, of course, that's why I mention the moon. And I should just say to you, if you've yet to watch your year 2025 deep dive individual zodiac forecast, please see beneath this video to click on yours. So Aries, your December forecast begins with a glorious link between the North Node in your sign, the moon in Sagittarius, and your ruler Mars in Leo. So a grand fire trine. So on the face of it, this is giving you a fantastic opportunity to get very invested in the things that help you to demonstrate your creativity, your flair, and where you can dazzle people with the force of your personality. The new moon, which comes later on the 1st, is also going to give you an appetite for a little bit of change. You know the old saying, change is as good as a rest. And if you have been thinking about going on a vacation, whether it is hunting out some winter sun or snow, the fact that the new moon is in your sister fire sign of Sagittarius can certainly give you an appetite for a change. If you can't make it away somewhere, what you can do is do some different things nearer to home. And because the two planets involved in travel, Mercury and Jupiter, are in an opposition as this month begins, the delight that you would get from stimulating your senses by doing something a little bit more off the cuff can certainly be palpable. So there is a big push in some ways for you to be more experimenting. But what's maybe going to hold you back? Well, it's not me being a killjoy. It's just Saturn and also Neptune are deeply entrenched in your 12th house. And that can be to do with your own inner blockages. It could be to do with a lack of energy. It could be feeling that you don't quite have the inner spark to do these more dramatic and exciting things that the planets give you the opportunity to grasp. But that doesn't mean to say you can't do them. It is going to be a choice. But I feel if you are in a situation, whether it's professionally, around friendships or your interests, where you do just feel very penned in, I think the chances are you're either going to want to retreat, to think about it a little bit and digest some recent events, or you're going to want to pursue some different activities. And if so, why not? But also, as this month begins, Venus at the top of your chart does suggest that if it's your work that you're wanting that change in, your people skills are still going to be very important. The 9th house can be about contracts, where that new moon is, but important to make sure that you get all your past experiences over in any kind of interview or presentation situation skillfully. But Venus and Uranus in the first week suggests you can think outside the box and blend your experience and knowledge with your people skills, and that could make you an exciting potential candidate. But on the 6th, if you are considering something to do with a contract or travel, just be aware that with Mercury still in its retrograde through to the middle of the month, the Sun and Mercury come into that GEMINI. That will help you if you need to crystallise something to get a deeper understanding. Maybe it is going to be a meeting with a professional, an accountant, a solicitor. You can cut through and really get to the nub of what something's about. So that could be really helpful to you. But I think you are going to start this month in a pretty enthusiastic way, but just do keep an eye on past issues. If you are coming to terms with some losses that have occurred, or maybe it's a big part of your life, because Saturn is very much to do with the big wheel of time. Something you started many years ago may be coming to a natural conclusion, perhaps by the end of 25, and you may want to start 2026 in a fresh and different way. But your ruler, Mars, does go into that retrograde on the 6th. And Mars becoming or slowing down here does mean that if you have showed a bit more of an enterprising approach, particularly to your dating or social interactions, you could again just want to qualify that a little bit. But because of Mars going opposite to Venus from the 10th to the 15th, is there someone in your circle that you're going to encounter? It may be by doing something completely different, going somewhere different, that you are going to connect to someone socially, and it can still be powerful despite that retrograde to your ruler. But if you are a particularly creative person, and being more proactive in that way as part of your desires, Mars slowing down does suggest that something that you've been working on may need some refinements, and that refinement process could go on through to the 18th of April. But although that might be frustrating, once it moves back into the sign of Leo, I think you'll be much more on the front foot, and whatever it is that was important to you will be much more clarified. Neptune goes direct on the 7th. If you have felt that your physical vitality has been affected by worries and anxieties, or just in a sense of just life's energies have just drained you a little bit more, wouldn't be a surprise if you've sensed that since early July. But Venus moving on the same day into Aquarius, that is your sector of connection to people. It is the festivities. If you're wanting to have a connection to people you haven't seen for a while, that's certainly going to be delicious. Is there one person that up until now you've considered in a purely platonic viewpoint, from a purely platonic viewpoint, who is actually going to become much more intriguing to you? Pluto adds depth. When Venus and Pluto combine, it gives us a much greater understanding of who shares our values and who could share our future. But the converse can be true. It could be who you don't necessarily want to be with in a long-term situation. The 15th sees the full moon. Mercury does go direct, the ruler of the 3rd house, the full moon in Gemini, but it is going to be squaring Neptune. So although Neptune's travelling forwards, you could still feel that you're drawing in energies. If you are a particularly sensitive person or going through some powerful stuff, you may want to close off some connection to social media, because all that assault of different information can be exactly the type of thing that you can find quite challenging. Now that brings us to the winter solstice, and it's bringing sharply into focus, what do you want to do? What is your desire in terms of your life connections? And if you do feel that you've been in some ways losing the time to invest on what you want as an individual, you may have some big decisions to make around your employment situation, not just here, but right through to the 20th of March, when we have the spring equinox. And with Chiron going direct on the 29th in your sign, getting in touch with what's really important for you in terms of clarifying your individuality and your life purpose is certainly part of that. But if there are new goals and ambitions that are emerging, you're certainly going to be much more conscious of them by the black moon, which occurs on the 30th. This wonderful rare event with 2 new moons in the same month for you is definitely giving you a lot of uplift and thrust if you are wanting to ascend to some kind of big prize, but it will take patient and sustained application in order to seize it. Your ruler Mars also comes into an opposition with Pluto as the year comes to a close. And I think because they are going to be in a direct opposition as we go into the new year on the 3rd of January, it gives you an idea that Mars can be very much about what we want as individuals. Pluto is very much about how things need to change. When the two are opposite, we can go for some kind of golden prize, but if in so doing, it has an impact on someone else in a way which is not particularly pleasant for them, we may get that prize, but it could be at a cost. So there may be something you need to evaluate and weigh up very, very carefully if you are considering a big decision about a career shift, something to do with a property matter. And I wouldn't rush it, because Mars opposite Pluto can make us quite willful and perhaps could see us a bit tempted to speed up the process, whereas the good thing about the Sun in Capricorn and the new moon, it does encourage us to slow things down a little bit. So this is a month where your thrust, which you've had from the solar eclipse in your sign since July the 13th, the eclipse series in Aries, you're going to get one more, of course, this coming spring. It's really given you a lot of appetite for self-expression and creativity. You can still go forwards with that because of that glorious fire grand trine right at the start of this month. But you do need to be aware that whatever you want to do as an individual has to fit in with your worldly interactions, paying the bills, as we all need to do. But socially, I think there can be some great fun and some lovely connections to be made. But your deeper soul, anything to do with your past, or if there are any ailments or any impediments that you have psychologically, they could be quite powerful this month if you are wanting to make a change. And you could find yourself a bit caught between two options, but by the end of the month, the chance to clarify what you need to do will become much clearer. Please do check out your year 2025 deep dive video forecast by clicking on the link underneath this video. And do remember, Aries, that on Christmas Eve, of course, we do have that square between Saturn and Jupiter. So that really amplifies being conscious of what's going on psychologically, subconsciously, perhaps more to do with the past. So any conversations you have need to feed into a greater understanding of who you are now and what you need now. But you could in some ways feel a little bit penned in by some obligations that are ongoing from the past. Thank you so much. Have a great Christmas and a happy new year, and all the best for 2025. Welcome, Taurus, to your in-depth monthly forecast for December 2025. If you order your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast, you also get your life roadmap report, 30% off, but also my free gift of your zodiac general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast for the coming year. Please see the link below for more. The personal forecast is totally unique to each person it's produced for and will give you searing insights for the next year. You'll get the rest of 24 free. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the month. We always need to be mindful of the luminaries, and of course they're coming into contact beautifully on the first day because December sees a black moon. So 2 new moons, the 1st and the 30th, the first for you, very much about deep transformations. The 8th house is about where we're most devoted, most invested. Where are you most devoted and invested? Well, the intriguing thing is that your ruler Venus is forging a superb link with Uranus in your sign through the first week of this month. So Venus is in a part of your situation, your sister Earth sign of Capricorn, which is very much about being enterprising, but also is a truth seeker. So if there is a deep relationship you're in, but you're not quite sure of what the land is or how the land is lying, I feel Venus in that angle to Uranus gives you a big desire to tease out what the reality is, because Uranus has been giving you a lot of push to demonstrate your individuality since March 2019 full time, and that angle to Venus just suggests that you need a relationship to feel alive. It needs to feel meaningful. It needs to have an essential truth for you to be invested and devoted in it. So if you are in a romantic tie, which does feel a bit stale, one of the big questions that you're asked this month is this really viably for your long term? Why is that? Well, it's because of the activity in House 11, Saturn, but also Neptune. Now, Neptune is going to be going direct on the 7th of this month after retracing his steps since the 2nd of July. It's a long old time that you may have felt a little bit of confusion about what you want from your future, but also Saturn going through its long retrograde of 5 months, but it's also asking you some searching questions about some of your connections, friendships and alliances, but also what you want from your future. So this new moon right at the start of the month can regenerate an area that's working well, because the 8th house is where we're all in, but it also can see enough energy there to see you considering bailing out if you don't feel that your commitment, your dedication is being shared and celebrated by the other side. So the problem with 8th house energy, it's very, very complex. For example, you could have a great sexual relationship with someone, but feel you got very little in common, or perhaps they're not very nurturing emotionally. Then again, you could have a really good business connection with someone and in an entrepreneurial sense work well together, but then in another way actually find their personality more challenging. Also, the 8th house can be where we're marshalling our long-term financial planning. So again, you can't be too idealistic, and that's really what Saturn's asking you to consider in the early part of this month. Are you being too idealistic? So the new moon can be where we set our intentions. So if there is someone you do want to get closer to, move in with, perhaps there is someone on your horizon that you're really drawn to in a mesmeric way, this new moon could bring them into your world over the following month, if that's what you want and if that's what's really right for you. But another juggle that you've got at the start of this month, along with that new moon being broadly square Saturn, which can be about the areas of life where we can face some challenges, is that Pluto's right at the top of your chart. So on that 10th house cusp, that's very influential, perhaps the most influential of all the things influencing your situation. What's going on with your professional situation? If you're not really sure, if you feel you're drifting a little bit, you're not really quite aware of exactly what you want to do, it will need to work with your home and emotional life. But with Mars right down on the 4th house, if you're not getting much encouragement or support from someone that you're supposed to be closely aligned to, and maybe they're a bit grumpy or defensive, that also can be something that makes you much more aware of what you want from that long-term plan. So Pluto right at the top of the chart does point towards transitions around your career, your employment, if you want to work for yourself, but having Mars broadly opposite all month, but particularly towards the end of the month, if you're not getting that support, that's something that makes you much more conscious of that. But that brings us through week 1. If you are single, you could have that charismatic connection because of Venus and Uranus can make something happen very quickly, and someone could make your pulse race. The cazimi, the Mercury cazimi on the 6th, is where the Sun and Mercury are side by side. In fact, Mercury's in the disk of the Sun as we see it from planet Earth. If you are someone who's interested in speculation or being more entrepreneurial, despite this inferior conjunction, because of the retrograde, you could still have a brilliant idea, because Mercury in the 8th house is a bit like turning your collar up on your detective smack and really getting beneath what's obvious and grappling with the deeper details and really penetrating to the core. So that can be good. But on the 6th, Mars does go retrograde. If you're not particularly happy in your emotional or home situation, right through to the 6th of January, you could find yourself really thinking very carefully about what to do. For example, if you've been going for a rental or a purchase, but you're not 100% sold on the proposition, the chances of rethinking it are probably quite strong. But on the 7th, Neptune does at least end that long retrograde. 42%, that's a heck of a lot of the year, isn't it? So if you have felt a bit unsure, even if your imagination has been incredible at times about what you want from your friendships or even what your higher beliefs are, things could ease a little. Also Venus, your ruler, does move right to the top of your chart also on the 7th. It could be a case of who as much as what you know when it comes to your career. Someone could put a good word in for you, or it could be a mutual connection, or if you are someone who's very artistic, which is often the case with Taurus people, if you do want to showcase those talents to a wider audience, Venus applying to Pluto will give you a fantastic opportunity from the 5th through to the 10th. Do believe in yourself. It can be a time of transitions. Your people skills can also be very strongly enamoured during that period. But from the 10th to the 15th, Venus does go opposite Mars. Venus in the 10th house can see you much more mindful of your desire to manifest your individual talent professionally. Again, are you getting that lack of support? If that's flagged up, that feeds back into that new moon at the start of the month, squared off by Saturn in your 11th house of the long term. The full moon on the 15th, however, is in the sign of Gemini, which for you is the 2nd house, everyday money. The opposite side of the heavens, Mercury goes direct, but we do have the Sun squaring up with Neptune and feeding into this full moon. You can't possibly choose an option around your future where you haven't really factored in some hard and fast figures, because if you do, if you just go with it on your sixth sense, you might actually end up a little bit disappointed. So crucial to be very realistic about resources, whether it's borrowing or loaning money to somebody else. Proceed with a great deal of caution. It will be difficult to get all the information. The 21st, however, could give you a big push towards some kind of escapism. It's the winter solstice and the Sun moves into your sister Earth sign of Capricorn. But it does forge a T-square to the nodal axis. If you are wanting to get away from it all, there could be some kind of deeper psychological reason. But that's probably true for most of us most of the time. But some kind of travel or dramatic change in your life can come in, not just in the following month, but over the following 13 weeks through the 4th of the cardinal quadrants, which takes us through to the vernal equinox. Take this seriously, because this is really asking you, do you need to be a bit more daring in order to get your objectives really fulfilled? The 29th sees Chiron go direct. If you have been struggling with your inner world, your psychological, if you felt a bit low and a bit hard on yourself in terms of your self-worth, Chiron going direct will help. But the chances are, with Chiron in the 12th house, you've been really supporting someone or somewhere along the way since Chiron's been in Aries, and your compassion has been appreciated to a degree, but has the other people, or have the other people had enough space to be so attuned to your needs? That's the big thing of Chiron in house 12. The new moon, however, the black moon on the 30th in Capricorn, really gives you a lot of impulse and momentum if you do want to break free. But just be aware that on Christmas Eve, Jupiter in your sector of everyday resources does square up with Saturn in that long-term part of your situation. So that needs to be realistic, very, very strongly highlighted. If you go back to the 12th of August, with an energy where Jupiter wants you to go and Saturn is saying no. So if your values don't align with someone you're closely connected to, friendship, business associate, employer, or a partner, that can show up on Christmas Eve. What a time. But that means, because of all this energy gushing in through the black moon on the 30th, that if you do feel a change of scene would be good for you, you could be jetting off somewhere with a good friend just to have some peace and tranquility and to take some time out. If you're not able to do something long haul, you may want to do something more rugged. Go out walking, travel off somewhere to see in the new year, that gives you a chance to refresh your senses. But Mars is in an opposition with Pluto as this month draws to a close within 3 degrees. And that tenuous balance between what you need emotionally and what you need to be doing in your worldly interactions could be part of the equation that you're trying to unpick as this month and this year come to a close. I hope you have a great December. I do Happy New Year, but do check out your year 2025 deep dive video by clicking on the link beneath this one. Welcome Gemini to your in-depth monthly forecast for December 2024 for the Ascendant, Sun or the Moon. If you order your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast, you also get your life roadmap report, 30% off, but also my free gift of your zodiac general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast for the coming year. Please see the link below for more. The personal forecast is totally unique to each person it's produced for and will give you searing insights for the next year. You'll get the rest of 24 free on the screen now. I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the month. As ever, we need to be mindful of your ruler Mercury, which does continue its retrograde through to the 15th, but it is in your sector of relating, where we have the moon applying to the sun. So we have a new moon in your sector of relating on the first day. We're going to have 2 new moons this month. The second is on the 30th, so it's a black moon month, which itself is a celestial wonderment. But this beginning of the month gives you a lot of opportunity to set your intentions about what you want in terms of the alliances in your life. Now, whether you're in a committed relationship, you work with people that you get on well with, you've got good family life and friendships, or things are more challenging, what this particular new moon gives you the chance to do is understand what you need, what might not be quite being fulfilled at this time. But it also gives you an opportunity to think about what other people you're connecting to may feel they're not getting from you. And with Mercury in the retrograde, there is always the chance of cross wires. And because Jupiter is in your sign, also in retrograde, we've got 2 planets that are being hosted by signs where they're in their detriment that are in retrograde. So it's not a time to take relationships for granted, particularly as Saturn, the planet of responsibility, obligation, limitation, but the ruler of time and fate, is right at the top of your chart and broadly T-square that opposition between your ruler Mercury and also Jupiter, but also pretty close to squaring up to the new moon too. So how you're perceived, whether it's at work, professionally, in terms of your local community, could in some ways be influenced by the way you relate. So if you're very skillful at it, doesn't mean to say there won't be the odd bump in the road over the following month, but it is a chance to think positively, because the sign of Sagittarius is very much about getting on the front foot and being very dynamic, but there is a need to just be realistic too. And it may be it's those professional relationships that need the greatest care, because since the 2nd of July, Neptune, the planet of dreams, has been in a retrograde in the same part of your situation as Saturn. Now Saturn, of course, has completed its retrograde season on the 15th of November. Neptune joins it this month on the 7th of December. But both Saturn and Neptune are applying in a potentially challenging way to your situation this month. And that's because those worldly interactions may be where you've been feeling the most pressure, the most resistance. So even if it's not your personal relationships, there may still be people that you're needing to lean into in terms of their needs. So that could be a company you work for, maybe it's a change in vibe there, different managers coming in, perhaps you're a manager and you have to relate some difficult choices to the people you work with. So for a lot of us, Saturn and Neptune being in Pisces has pushed us really to become more conscious of the emotion of that part of life. So for you, it's the emotion of your work, your public presence. But the new moon, of course, can be a time, if you're single, when you can just really ask the universe to bring that special person into your world. And the planet of relating, Venus, actually starts this month in a very deep and passionate part of your chart, forging a link to Uranus in your 12th house. Is it possible that someone from your past keeps calling out to you? Maybe subconsciously, maybe you've had dreams about them, maybe you've seen their images pop up on social media, but you could find yourself tempted to get in touch with someone that you did once have quite an electric connection to. Would that be the right thing to do? Only you could say. It's also possible that you could have perhaps a more confidential connection, particularly if you're already in a relationship. There may be someone else who is just having some kind of impact upon you, and that energy can feed into the first week of this month. But on the 6th, your ruler Mercury sits in the disk of the Sun exactly. It's a cazimi, but it's an inferior conjunction because Mercury is in its retrograde through to mid-month. But whatever you want around relationships will be amplified at that time. But it could give you an opportunity to have a moment of brilliance, particularly if you're wanting to connect to someone and work collaboratively with them. Or it could give you the confidence to make that connection to someone that you've long admired. So that's interesting. Now Mars starts this month in a very dynamic link to the new moon. So if there are things that you want to say and you want to be persuasive, the link between Mars, the position of the moon, but also the North Node right at the start of the month is a dazzling one, but then Mars goes into its retrograde, which occurs every 2 years. It's going to be retracing its steps in the sign of Leo through to the 6th of January, whence it will rewind back into the sign of Cancer, which for you is to do with life's foundations, everyday money. It will emerge back into the sign of Leo on the 18th of April. And you're going to find, particularly with Uranus arriving in your sign for 4 months, from the 7th of July next year, and also Saturn and Neptune pitching up in the sign of Aries, linking back to Pluto. Lots of exciting stuff's coming your way next year, for sure. And of course, Jupiter, the planet of growth, will move into the sign of Cancer, where she's exalted, which could be good for your finances. So this slowing down of Mars, it could create some frustrations for you. But if you are wanting to work most on finances, the frustration that you're feeling now can actually work out to your advantage. So the message that you need to share can be clarified by the time Mars re-emerges in Leo on the 18th of April. And then next year you can see there's lots for you to go for in terms of opening out your approach in a much more dynamic way. But on the 7th, Neptune ends that long retrograde. If you have felt a bit disillusioned perhaps with your work, if you are someone who's quite sensitive, quite a caring person, and you do work in quite rigid, unyielding and unbending type of environment, that could have felt quite suffocating. But perhaps Neptune going forwards is encouraging you, particularly when it forges a square to the full moon in your sign on the 15th to think about how you can influence things in terms of your professional future by getting in touch with the platform that or the outlet that would help you to shine in a more natural way. But also on the 7th, much more encouragingly, Venus moves into your sister air sign of Aquarius. Venus in Aquarius is an interesting transition. I have it here natally. My wife has it, conjunct my sun. So Venus in Aquarius people can be a bit different when it comes to relationships. Can get on with lots of different types of people who may have very different ways of being. Generally, Venus in Aquarius can be a bit less judgy, but also it can be very friendly. So if you are wanting to bring a greater sense of spontaneity into your love life, Venus suggests there could be an opportunity to mix and mingle with different friends. It immediately connects to Pluto. If you have been struggling to understand what you want from an existing relationship, Venus bursting into Aquarius and applying to Pluto will give you an ultimate slice of truth. Whether you act on it or not would be down to you, but I feel that that would help you to understand what could be really good for you. Now, it's also true that Venus is going to be going opposite Mars, so the chance of being really attracted to someone from the 10th to the 15th that you know personally is definitely stepped up, particularly someone who's quite bright-minded. Now, that wouldn't be a surprise for you. You've got one of the most nimble and dexterous ways of being of all the zodiac signs, and a constant need for stimulation. But if you encounter someone who was a bit more like you, perhaps a bit unpredictable, a bit edgy, but a bit provocative, it actually could really be something that you like. But the full moon on the 15th does really flag up that if you're not happy in a relationship, if you set your intentions on your new moon earlier in the year, in June, and it's not really being fulfilled as far as a relationship's concerned, with Mercury going direct also on the 15th, you may want to take greater control. But there is a 3-degree square to Neptune, so you need to make sure that you have clarity before making any binding decisions. But I think Venus applying to Pluto will certainly help you to have it. There could be more than one option. Wouldn't be a total surprise for yourself because you've got such a gift for getting on with different types of people. But 21st does see the winter solstice. This ushers in cardinal quadrant 4, the last of the 4 quadrants of the year. Western tropical astrology is predicated on the seasons. And the solar eclipse, the last in the series that's going to be repeated in Aries on the 29th of March, is once more emphasising that friendship dimension in your situation. But I feel that this nodal axis applying to the winter solstice could get you thinking a lot about how your values mesh with other people, or maybe even how you earn money, but earn money for the long term. So the nodal axis, the point of destiny, is for the current time through to the 11th of January, guiding you towards something that fulfills your heart, and it could be some kind of collective, whereas the winter solstice in Capricorn is much more it's much more about the reality of finance. You can't be too idealistic, I feel, is the lesson from that. Chiron goes direct on the 29th. If there has been some friendships or some connections that have disappointed you, not because of your ability to rub along, but more about other people not quite celebrating what you bring to situations, I feel Chiron going direct will help you to move on a bit. But the new moon, which occurs at the end of the year on the 30th, the black moon, is very much about being business-like. And if you are someone who's found with Pluto, if you've got late planets in Gemini and Pluto's been forging the quincunx to those positions, you may have found that earning a living or creating a financial future that feels steady has proved a bit elusive in recent years. So this new moon can help you as long as you can get over the energy of the way the nodes apply to the winter solstice. You can have an opportunity to really move forwards and burst into the new year. The more entrepreneurial part of your nature can get a chance to thrive. But Christmas Eve, we do have that square between Jupiter in your sign and with Saturn, which is going to be applying all month. It occurred before on the 12th of August, on the 19th of August, and really it's a big deal because they came together in a conjunction in 2020, which only happens once every 20 years. One represents growth, Jupiter, one represents more limitation. The sign of Pisces for you is where you want to reach for the sky. I feel that you could find that your individual way of expressing yourself does in some ways get scrutinized just before Christmas, but it could be around your professional situation, which could feel frustrating for you if you're trying to give it absolutely everything. But by the end of the year, Mars is opposite Pluto, and if you've yet to watch my Pluto in Aquarius video for 2025, please see the link below. Have a great December, Gemini. Please do check out your year 2025 deep dive video forecast by clicking on the link beneath this one. Take care, all the best, and goodbye. Cancer, it's your in-depth monthly forecast for December 2024 for the ascendant, the sun, or the moon. If you order your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast, you also get your life roadmap report, 30% off, but also my free gift of your zodiac general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast for the coming year. Please see the link below for more. The personal forecast is totally unique to each person it's produced for and will give you searing insights for the next year. You'll get the rest of 24 free. Now, the moon phases are particularly important for your sign, of course, because she is your ruler. So on the first day, she combines magnificently with the sun in the part of your chart. It's very much to do with practicalities. On the last day, she combines with the sun in the part of your situation that's very much to do with relationships. So we have a black moon. And then in the middle of the month, on the 15th, we have a full moon. That's where the moon and the sun are not on good terms. They're face to face. And it's possible that is going to tease out into the open some issues that are not necessarily entirely obvious as you start this month. But on the screen now, I'm showing the event chart, which shows your moon position applying to the sun as they come into an exact conjunction later on the 1st. But look at the position of Mars. Mars is in your second house. It's going to be in direct motion through to the 6th when it slams on the brakes, but through to the 6th of January, it does give you a chance to be a bit more assertive around your financial situation. So that link between Mars, the moon, the sun, but also if you look at the North Node right at the top of your chart, means that if you come into this month wanting to be businesslike about resources, getting more organized, refining some parts of your situation which could work a little bit better, squeezing more from the money or the resources you've got, there's going to be a lot of fiery energy in order to help you to do that. What's not to like? Well, it's just that Saturn, the planet of limitation, has since March 2003 been in your sister water sign of Pisces, which is about where essentially you want to be more adventurous, pioneering, travel, expand. But of course Saturn is a bit counterintuitive to all those yearnings, which have been stirred by Neptune since 2012. So Mars does broadly T-square the position of both Mercury in Sagittarius and also Jupiter in Gemini, but also it does broadly square up to the new moon. So one of the things you should be more conscious of at the start of this month is if you do want to be more virtuous, don't get knocked off course because somebody else thinks that you should be doing this or that. The 9th house is where people can have quite trenchant opinions, can be a little bit dogmatic, but there also may be some responsibilities and obligations you've got that do pen you in a little bit, because as much as you can be very giving and nurturing, we all do need to do our own things at times, and that's underscored at the start of this month, Cancer, by the position of Venus, which is beautifully aligned for you in your 7th house. Venus absolutely sparkles, and that link between Venus and Uranus could mean that there's going to be some surprise invitations to do something that's a bit different. It could be that some friends want to get together and it's all maybe done quite speedily, but actually it could be something that really gives you quite a lot of uplift. But of course, Venus in the 7th house can be about personal relationships. Is there going to be some electricity around someone you encounter? Maybe it's going to be a festive party to do with your work. But with Mercury in a retrograde as this month begins, you might be wondering whether this could actually play out. I think the great thing to do with Venus and Uranus is definitely keep an open mind about what the possibilities are, because I think that gives you the chance to just let events unfold more naturally, which in a way is what Uranus is all about. But there could be somebody that you have had a very good rapport with, but maybe suddenly the energy can change between you, and it can seem a lot more vital and a lot rawer, but also in some ways much more exciting. That is entirely possible. But back to those practicalities, because we do have on the 6th a GEMINI. It's an inferior conjunction, so that's Mercury this side of the Sun because of the retrograde, but it does mean the Sun glows up the natural qualities of Mercury, and in house 6, that's very much its Virgoan energy. So you can be one of the best managers of anything, whether it's managing your budget, a big business, the family. Cancers have a natural gift for that, but there may be another detail that you can change or add or in some ways moderate that just gives you another little added advantage, so watch out for that. But on the 6th, Mars does start that retrograde in the sign of Leo. So if you have been feeling like you would like to be a little bit more speculative with your resources, just saying, it doesn't mean to say you can't keep thinking about things, but whilst it is going through the retrograde, just be conscious that through to the 6th of January, that things won't perhaps happen quite as quickly as you would like. But on the 7th, Neptune ends a very long retrograde, which began on July the 2nd. That's a great amount of weeks. It's 22 weeks. And Neptune may have created some uncertainties, but it also may have, in its retrograde, made you much more conscious of what you did want vis-a-vis the reality of the situation, which Saturn has been reminding you of. But also on the 7th, Venus does make the move from Capricorn into Aquarius. If you have been getting along well with someone, perhaps it's been quite flirtatious, perhaps you've had some kind of clinch, it's possible that it could get very hot as Venus gets into an embrace with Pluto. But also Venus combining with Pluto could be good for your financial situation, because that new moon at the start of the month is asking you, along with that connection to Mars and the North Node, to get proactive about your resources. So I feel that Venus connecting to Pluto in your 8th house is about the long term. If you've yet to write a will, if you're thinking about a legacy, how to work in terms of planning your long-term finances, things like taxation planning and stuff like that, people do need to do it. We do need to think ahead for when things can change. And Venus applying to Pluto, although it's a difficult and sometimes conversation we don't really want to be having, that could be a great time to have it. But that's Venus going into Aquarius, which is the sign of friendship, can also amp up any attraction that may have been building up with someone in your circle. But Venus does go face to face with Mars. If you are someone who's really set yourself a stringent budget for Christmas, you might find that you're really struggling to control the impulse to stay within it, because that opposition there really has written all over it the desire to do your best for the people that really matter to you. But if there is someone that you're finding very, very hard to resist in a more intimate way, it could really get very intense indeed. But on the 15th, we do have a full moon, and that full moon is in a complex and sensitive part of your situation, the 12th house. But it does see on the same day Mercury go direct. If you have been waiting for news on an appointment, something's been delayed, there's been some kind of niggle or some brittleness, that can start to melt away. But the full moon can bring into the open some complexities, particularly at work, I'm afraid. If there has been a situation where there's some gossip or office politics, you can become much more conscious of it towards the end of this year. But there are some potential solutions too, because on the 21st, the Sun moves to join up with the sign of Capricorn, which is your 7th house. That's the winter solstice, ushering in cardinal quadrant 4. And that is going to help you to assert your boundaries. So if someone has been up to no good, with some nefarious stuff, you're going to be much more aware of it, but much more inclined to push back. The 24th, Christmas Eve, however, does see an exact square between Saturn and Jupiter. Jupiter in the sign of Gemini, not at its best, starts this month, of course, in that sign in the opposition to Mercury, broadly squaring up with Saturn. It reaches a peak now. They did come into an exact square on the 19th of August. That's going to be repeated next year on the 15th of June, once Jupiter's moved into your sign and Saturn into Aries. If you want to know what that's about, please do check out my Saturn deep dive video. But you can also check out your year 2025 Cancer deep dive video by clicking on the link beneath this video. But if we think about it, Jupiter in the 12th house is to do with sensitivities. Saturn in the 9th house can be to do with higher truths. So there could be something that comes into full view on the 24th that may need to be stared into and faced up to. But the new moon, the second of the two new moons this month, the black moon on the 30th, certainly gives you a great chance to assert the power that comes from you being a cardinal sign. Because even if life sometimes feels that it's against us, and maybe with Pluto in your 7th house, you have experienced some big disappointments and challenges around your relationship sector, but it may have also seen you act in quite an authoritative way at times in terms of setting your boundaries. And the lessons you learnt about that are revisited in a way by the Capricorn new moon at the end of this year, and because Mars and Pluto are inching back towards an exact opposition, which becomes exact on the 3rd of January. So don't underestimate your ability to deal with things. But what I would say is in the 3rd week of this month, just be aware that there's a lot of energy misting around that's hard to read. But by the end of the year, you'll be determined to face up any challenges that are out there. But most of all, let people know exactly what you stand for. And that's a very important thing in life. If we stop worrying about what other people think of us and just say, this is me, if that's not for you, fine. This is me, because you're taking possession of who you are. So this is a month when you can get cracking on some practicalities. You may need to be a little bit patient around them. The financial side of things can start brightly, may slow down a little bit. Just be aware, however, there could be some informational details or a contractual matter which does at times interfere with your peace of mind. But by the end of the month, you're going to be on top form as you prepare yourself to burst into the new year. Have a marvellous Christmas and New Year celebration, Cancer, and do check out that year 2025 deep dive video by clicking on the link below. Welcome, Leo, to your in-depth monthly forecast for December 2024 for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. If you order your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast, you also get your life roadmap report, 30% off, but also my free gift of your zodiac general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast for the coming year. Please see the link below for more. The personal forecast is totally unique to each person it's produced for and will give you searing insights for the next year. You'll get the rest of 24 free. On the screen now, I'm sharing the event chart right at the start of the month, and you can see Mars, the planet of passion, is in your sign. Now, he will be going retrograde on the 6th, but he will stay in Leo for the whole of the month through to the 6th of January before inverting back into the sign of Cancer. But he forges right at the start of this month a glittering alliance with the North Node in Aries, but also the Moon in Sagittarius. So that grand fire trine is great news for you, particularly as later on the 1st of the month, the moon inches forwards and applies to the sun. That new moon is the 5th house, which is the jolliest, warmest, friendliest, most social and most dazzling new moon you can have each year. Now, it is moderated somewhat by Saturn by 3 degrees in a square, so it's just saying to you that if you are in the mood to be very upbeat and bubbly, you just need to be mindful of the financial side of it. But that collection between Mars, the node and the position of the moon gives you a lot of investment as you come into this month in terms of your personal energies, your vitality, your enthusiasm, your charisma can really be to the fore as this month begins. Now, Venus and Uranus are also in a super trine. But Venus for you is in a very practical area, the 6th house. Venus can be about money, and the 6th house can be about resources, particularly in Capricorn. But Uranus is in your 10th house, which is how you link to the wider world. Now, Uranus can be an unpredictable energy, and perhaps your professional situation has been changing since March 2019. But if you have got an idea that your enthusiasm and passion can be supported by trying something a little different around your work, particularly if it is creative in any way, then you could take a big step forwards right from the start of this month. So a lot to like. Also, Mercury merges with the Sun on the 6th at GEMINI. If there is something that you want to do, perhaps meet up with some friends, perhaps there is a pre-Christmas get-together, you could be in very bubbly form. But of course, Mercury is retrograde through to the 15th, so there is the potential for some last minute changes of plan. If you're single, there could be a number of different people that are gravitating towards you, but it might not be completely clear who's going to become more rooted in your life. But then on the 6th too, Mars goes into a retrograde. Mars is with you in this initial, or in his initial journey through the sign of Leo of 9 weeks. He's going to come back into Leo once he leaves on the 6th of January on the 18th of April through to the 17th of June. So that's a big window of opportunity for you to demonstrate your drive and passion. And Mars does broadly oppose Pluto for the whole of this month. Pluto's in your sector of relating full time now, so this Mars retrograde suggests that maybe some things that mean a lot to you, that you've got a lot of attachment to in terms of your unique individuality, might at times not seem to be celebrated by others as much as you would like. There is the possibility of a battle of wills, particularly in a relationship, I feel, but that doesn't mean to say that it can't still see you grow. It's just that because both Mars and Pluto are in fixed signs, the potential for someone taking a might is right attitude is strong, and therefore if there is something that does come up, you really need to ask yourself the question, is it worth really investing that much energy in? So you need to weigh up any dispute quickly, because otherwise you could find that several things could be quite aggravating. What can help you, however, is that on the 7th, Neptune, which has been causing some confusion since early July, goes direct, but Venus makes her way into your opposite sign, applies to Pluto, and that will help you to feel really connected to someone. So even if there was a few a few moments of attraction that didn't then go on, if you are starting this month single with that Mercury retrograde, if you do orientate towards someone you really like, Venus and Pluto together could lock you in that connection. But it will always be a tie that will have a degree of drama around it, I feel, but it certainly has the potential for deep connection. If you're in a relationship which is ongoing, and maybe there have been some things that have got in the way a little bit, perhaps your social life, their social life, Venus moving into Aquarius gives you the chance to try and celebrate the things you have in common between you. Try to harmonise things. There's no better place for Venus to be than the 7th house, but applying to Pluto does make the stakes that much higher. So if things have been a bit touch and go, that conjunction could help you to make a binding decision for good or bad. But then on the 15th there is a full moon, and it's a full moon in the sign of Gemini. Gemini energy can be quite flirty, changeable. Certainly for you it's a very sociable one, but it is of course opposite the position of the Sun in Sagittarius, which is more about what you want. The position of the moon is more about what other people may want from you. Mercury actually goes direct on that day. That can definitely help, but Neptune does apply, despite coming out of its retrograde, in a square to, or a T-square to both the moon and the Sun. So finance could be an issue that does cause some discontent, particularly if one of you's got a different approach to the budget for Christmas and the other person doesn't really feel heard. With Neptune, very, very important to be as realistic as possible. We'd all like to be, super generous to those we care for. It just depends on what you can truly afford. Now, the 21st sees the winter solstice. Really important event in Western tropical astrology, ushers in the last of the 4 quadrants of the year, because Western tropical astrology is divided by 4 lots of 13. This one for you is about practicalities, but it does T-square up to the nodal axis. Yes, practicalities may call out to you. Perhaps you're going to be the one who's looking after people over Christmas, and that sense of responsibility is something that Pluto has definitely been imbuing in you for many years. But this year there could be a little bit of a sense of rebellion with the nodal axis there, which is much more about your desire for freedom, especially with Mars's retrograde meeting the advancing Pluto, which becomes much more intense over the last few days of this month. But the 24th, Christmas Eve, it's a big day for astrology in general, because Saturn and Jupiter meet in a square. This last occurred on the 19th of August. It's going to happen next year on the 15th of June, but by then Saturn will have moved temporarily into Aries, and Jupiter will make its once in 12-year visits to Cancer. But this one, let's think about it. Saturn in the 8th house. It is about shared resources, money, and the position of Jupiter is in the very friendly, sociable 11th house, but starts this month in an opposition with Mercury, both in retrograde, both in detrimental positions. So very jolly, but Saturn's saying, what about the money? So that could be something you may need to consider. And then on the 29th, Chiron goes direct. If you have had a sense that your knowledge base or your ability to learn things or your professional qualifications are not quite up to scratch, that may have been emphasized by Chiron's retrograde. Don't underestimate how you help people through your life experience. Even if you are someone who's very academically qualified, there may still it may have still felt that you do a lot of advising, but people don't necessarily celebrate what you give them, but you can celebrate what you give them, and also do believe in what you have to offer, which brings us to the black moon, which brings the celestial curtain down on this month, the new moon in Capricorn on the 30th. Now this emphasises that practicality that Pluto was drilling you around since 2008. So as you work into the new year, it could make you mindful of the potential to do something quite virtuous, set your intentions around a New Year's resolution, all that kind of stuff. It may be something that you have already planned, but it may be something that's not to do with a personal change like that. Maybe you are thinking about changing your working situation, and that could be a big aspiration for you as you burst into the new year. Speaking of which, Leo, have you watched your deep dive for year 2025 yet? Please see the link beneath this video for more on that, because that is going to help you to understand what the challenges but what the opportunities are for this new year. Wishing you a very happy Christmas, take care and goodbye. Welcome Virgo to your in-depth monthly forecast for December 2024 for the ascendant, the sun or the moon. If you order your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast, you also get your life roadmap report 30% off, but also my free gift of your zodiac general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast for the coming year. Please see the link below for more. The personal forecast is totally unique to each person it's produced for and will give you searing insights for the next year. You'll get the rest of 24 free. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the month. Now there's a big focus on your fourth house, which is very much to do with how we feel, can be to do with our immediate environment, family matters, our emotional life, our need for security. And you can see the moon is applying to the sun. So the new moon will occur later on the first day. But there is a little bit of a paradox because your ruler Mercury is in retrograde in the very same area, but it's also in an opposition to Jupiter. So if part of your intention setting around where you live or around your hopes for Christmas is very optimistic because of that opposition between Mercury and Jupiter, it is just going to be important to factor in when Mercury is in a retrograde in a sign it's detrimented in, Jupiter detrimented too, perhaps your expectations need in some ways to be conditioned by a slice of reality. And I want you to also be mindful of the location of Saturn. Saturn's in a broad T-square with Jupiter and Mercury, but also with the new moon. So however much we all would like things to go very sweetly and smoothly through the festive period, there could be a few bumps in the road. Now your ruler Mercury does go direct on the 15th, but that's also the day when we have the full moon. And the full moon is also going to be influenced by a planet in your sector of relating, like Saturn, but this time Neptune. So relationships this month, be they those home, emotional and family ties, be it with a personal partner, a colleague, a friend, will need a degree of care because perhaps your hope, quite rightly, is to create something that's more secure, more stable, more nurturing, and that's a really lovely aspiration to have. But you do just need to be mindful of that Saturn position at the start of the month and the drifting dreamy energy of Neptune like Saturn in your sector of relating, which is going to be influential too. However, on the plus side, Virgo, you have a glorious link between Venus in the most playful, even glamorous part of your scope and Uranus as you come into this new month. And they're going to be in touch with one another for the first week. So if you did want to do something a little bit different, maybe decide not to host Christmas, if that's usually been your thing, and go somewhere that creates a little bit of excitement, There's nothing like a change creating some stimulation. And even if you're someone who, is very conscientious, which is often the case, in terms of your love life, although that nurturing emotional dimension that the new moon is asking you to feed into on the first day is clearly very important, if we have a tie that's very safe and secure but also runs on the dull side, that's not necessarily going to be enough. So if you are in a situation, perhaps it's about where you live, you don't feel you live in quite the right environment, perhaps it's the actual property you live in isn't quite feeding your senses in the way you want, what the angle between Venus and a very playful, flirty part of your chart with Uranus is saying is, do give yourself permission to be a little bit more edgy in your approach. But that's where Saturn may in some ways moderate your desire to be more playful, because it could see you just a little fearful of rocking the boat or doing something that's a bit different. But if you do need to penetrate down into these different strands that you're working with, as your ruler, Mercury combines with the Sun on the 6th in a cazimi. It's an inferior conjunction because Mercury is in retrograde, but it does mean Mercury sits in between the Sun and Earth. And of course the Sun magnifies the brilliance of Mercury. So Mercury in the 4th house can see us circulate doubts around our mind and find it a little bit difficult to actually say how we feel. But hopefully the fact that the cazimi will glow up Mercury's communicational talents will see you be a little bit more open about what you want. I think another complicating factor for you, Virgo, to be honest, is that Mars is locked in your 12th house for the whole of this month. It is going to go face to face with Pluto within 3 degrees by the end of the month, but broadly they're not really on the greatest of terms all through December. And perhaps part of what's going on for you is, if you have been tremendously sacrificing in the past, Mars in your 12th house could be arousing some resentment, or if there has been some past issues that you've managed at times to put to one side, as Mars goes into his retrograde on the 6th, the same day as that cazimi, you may find it more difficult not to really bring up and release those old resentments, hurts or angers. So just be aware that Mars can be quite complex in the 12th house, particularly when he slows down. So if there is some burdens from your past that have yet to be really worked through, this would be a good time to really look at them again. But the aforementioned Neptune, which is going to still provide some mystique and potentially some confusion this month, does go direct on the 7th too. Think back to the early part of July. That's when Neptune went into its annual retrograde, which represents 42% of each year. And of course, Neptune is, like Saturn, in your sector of relating. So if there has been some confusion since then, or you've not quite been sure about certain involvements, part of it undoubtedly would have been the role of Saturn. And Saturn does continue to be broadly square with Jupiter this month. Now they're going to reach a peak in their square on the 24th of December, Christmas Eve. But Jupiter has in some ways been pushing you to raise your profile when it comes to your professional situation. But because it is in retrograde, it is detrimented and it is squared off by Saturn. If you have got some hopes, it may feel as if what other people think about you is really the key rather than your core talents. So I feel that although Neptune going direct can help to ease some of the lethargy or confusion that may have provided a backdrop, it's not going to be a panacea. The 7th also sees Venus move to apply to Pluto in your 6th house. And Pluto here from the 19th of November and from the 21st of January to the 2nd of September this year has been pushing you to think again about those sacrifices, responsibilities and obligations that you've often taken on unquestionably. And if there is a job that you're in that does feel that you don't really get that much recognition or appreciation, even though you're very dedicated, I have to be honest, Pluto is going to push you, particularly through to 2043 initially, to think about transforming where you sacrifice your time and energy. So as Venus applies to it, it's your professional or work-based relationships that could come under the astral microscope. Now, in a flirty way, if you are wanting to connect to someone romantically, the link between Venus and Pluto could mean that suddenly someone you encounter in an ordinary location, a fitness suite. Sorry if I use these analogies in a bit of a similar way, but the supermarket queue is somewhere quite practical. You could find yourself having a real sense of a connection, but equally, if there are colleagues that are very supportive of you, the sense of appreciation between you can also increase with Venus applying to Pluto. However, if you're in a romantic tie and you're trying to feed into that new moon energy about how it feels, but also you wanted a bit more play and charisma from that initial Venus-Uranus link at the start of the month, I feel that Venus applying to Pluto could make you think, is it a bit too much give and not enough get? Or is it you who's taken a partner a little bit for granted, but particularly around the domestic chores? If you can get a fairer balance of those, that's going to be a great way to bring a greater sense of equilibrium and harmony to bear. But we also have Venus moving into an opposition with Mars, and that is from the 10th to the 15th. If there is someone that you're secretly attracted to, perhaps at work, that energy between you can be very compelling. Will you do anything about it? Well, that is obviously down to your personal decision making. But the 15th does see Mercury, your ruler, go direct. It will still be in its post-retrograde shadow period through to the 3rd of January. So just be aware it won't completely unblock some of the planning for Christmas, some of the politics perhaps around the family situation, but it can ease things a bit. But on the same day, the moon's very high in the sky, and it's also squaring up to the position of Neptune. So that full moon's asking you to think about your professional situation, or it could just feel like everyone can peer into your soul and you don't seem to have much to say about it. And that could feel a little uncomfortable, particularly if you are a very private person. But if you're trying to get the classic work-life balance aligned in your situation, Neptune's misty, mysterious, swirling, rather ephemeral energies could make it a little tricky, despite the fact that Neptune is travelling direct. In fact, in week 3 of this month, it could be a professional relationship that seems confusing or draining as the Sun continues to square with Neptune. Now, if you've yet to watch your year 2025 deep dive Virgo forecast, please do click on the link underneath this video where you can do so. But on the 21st, you do have a big uptick because we have the winter solstice. The Sun arrives in your sister Earth sign of Capricorn. And that's great because that brings a much more outgoing dimension into play. It's more playful. If you have been doing a lot of planning, thinking, preparation, especially if you are going to be having those aforementioned guests, then certainly this is a lovely moment. It also ushers in cardinal quadrant 4, the last quarter of the Western tropical astrological year, which takes you round to the 20th of March, and when we start the whole process again with the vernal equinox in cardinal quadrant 1. So generally the next 13 weeks are pushing you, Virgo, to be more self-expressive. But this particular year's winter solstice does forge a pretty broad T-square to the nodal axis. Now the nodal axis is going to be arriving in terms of the south node into your sign on the 11th of January. That's the true node. So what we've got here is the position of the north node, the point of destiny, is your 8th house. And that can be where we're most invested, devoted, but it also can be where life's transforming. Sometimes where things are coming to a close, but new things are being birthed. So if there is someone that you're attracted to, you just need to make sure that if you are going to have that clinch under the mistletoe, that if your expectations are for something much more deeply romantic and lasting, that's the type of person that you end up connecting with. If it's more of a fleeting moment of passion, but that's not really what you want, you could get hurt. But then again, you might be quite clear what you want, the other person too, and it's all cool. But just be aware of that nodal axis square. The 29th, however, sees Chiron go direct. Chiron, in the same location as the North Node, the point of destiny, is the 8th house. If you have been thinking very deeply about a sexual involvement, your long-term financial situation, or you have felt that you've got a bit of a lacking around intimacy, that may have been more obvious to you since the middle of July 2023, when the nodal axis first reversed in terms of the North Node into Aries. But with Chiron going direct gives you a chance to try to let go of any self-examination which is too wounding. Do give yourself some forgiveness if you feel that something's not quite as you want it. Things can change radically, particularly with the glorious new moon and the black moon, which brings this month and year to a close, because it's in house 5 for you, which means you're going to burst into the new year in very charismatic form. Yes, you've done a lot of soul searching with that Sagittarian new moon and Mercury being in retrograde in your 4th house. But I'd just like to remind you that at the start of 2023, Mercury was retrograde in your 4th house. So I feel thinking about your emotional and family relationships has been a bit of a theme for the whole of 23. As you come to an end of the year, Mars and Pluto do go tighter into their opposition, which also becomes exact at the start of next year. So if there are any politics, they could still come up, but if you're footloose and fancy free, it's a great chance to celebrate the New Year celebrations in style, for sure. I hope you have a wonderful Christmas and New Year. And please check out your year 2025 forecast. All the best and goodbye. Welcome Libra to your in-depth monthly horoscope for December 2024 for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. If you order your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast, you also get your life roadmap report, 30% off, but also my free gift of your zodiac general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast for the coming year. Please see the link below for more. The personal forecast is totally unique to each person it's produced for and will give you searing insights for the next year. You'll get the rest of 24 free. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the month. First of all, we need to look at the role of your ruler Venus. Venus is in the sign of Capricorn, which for you is house 4, which could give you a desire to make sure that your home, particularly if you're going to be welcoming guests, is as refined and stylized as possible. So you could, even at this late stage of the year, find yourself at least moving some furniture around, clearing some space, or perhaps doing some late redecoration. But Venus is forging a link to Uranus at the start of this month. And Uranus, of course, is the planet of change, but also of surprises. And because it's in your 8th house, I think it's possible that some kind of good news linked to a property matter, or perhaps someone could be very generous to you within your family or extended family, which really will provide some uplift. But of course, the role of the luminaries is also key. And you can see that the moon is about to apply exactly to the role of the sun. So that happens later on the 1st with the Sagittarius new moon. For you, house 3, very much about quick communications, connections to siblings, neighbours, people in your local community. If you are involved in the world of technology or social media, this gives you an extra glow up. What's not to like? Particularly as the moon links back to Mars in your sector of friendship and sociability, but also they both link back in a grand trine to the position of the North Node in your sector of relating. So a conversation you have in December, particularly if you're single, could have quite a flirty dimension to it, but at the very least be very sociable. But because Venus starts this month in a part of your chart which is about how you feel, that's going to be a guiding principle still. And also Mercury, the planet of communication, does start this month in retrograde. That's going to go on through to the 15th, but Mercury actually starts the month in an opposition to Jupiter. Now, if ever there was a bubbly combination, it's those two facing each other up. We just need to be mindful. Mercury's detrimented, Jupiter's detrimented too. Is there some mutual receptivity because they're both in the signs each rules? Possibly. But because of the retrograde, I think it is important that if you're discussing anything, particularly of a contractual nature, that you really don't rush your decision making. Just give yourself the emotional space to really be exacting in looking at the information. And that's where Saturn can really help you. There's Saturn for you in house 6. Since March 2023, your physical vitality may not have been the greatest. You may have also at times felt overburdened with the amount of responsibilities and obligations you've had. Saturn, of course, went through a big retrograde, which unwound last month, but the link here, the T-square that's broadly between Saturn and Jupiter and Mercury, but also the new moon at the start of the month, just conditions you around that fact-checking, taking the time to look at the detail of things. Because you love equilibrium, if you're linking with people where the vibe feels right, that can be something that gives you a sense of optimism. And that's good, but at the same time, just be conscious of those details. I think that's really important. Now, on the 6th, you've got to get a great opportunity to think about an important detail, but also express yourself with passion, verve, and enthusiasm as we have a Mercury cazimi. That's when Mercury sits in between the Sun and Earth. It's an inferior conjunction because Mercury's in the retrograde. So you could find yourself discussing something that had been looked at before but didn't come to a firm outcome, and it actually could delight you. Because a cazimi sees the sun really pour its warming energy into the heart of Mercury, so it magnifies Mercury's qualities. So you're a natural communicator. You can be diplomatic, but you are a cardinal sign, and when you need to, you can stand in your power. And one of the things that Pluto has been teaching you in recent years is to set your boundaries. Now, of course, last month, Pluto moved for the long term into your sister air sign of Aquarius. And as this month goes on, Mars on the other side of the heavens is going to come into a direct opposition with Pluto in the last few days. But what we're going to see is that Mars slows down from the 6th. So the same day as the cazimi, Mars goes retrograde. Mars is going to go retrograde through to the 23rd of February, but it's actually going to step back into the sign of Cancer on the 6th of January. Now, for you, having Mars in the sign of Leo is terrific for your connections to others socially, or perhaps around situations where you're wanting to be more collegiate, a collective effort, whilst at the same time retaining your sense of individuality. So Mars slowing down there is not going to see your social life suddenly peel away, but it could make you a little bit more thoughtful about who you do want to connect with. The 7th sees Neptune, which has been in retrograde since the start of July, end its long backward grind. And if that has also been applying to certain points in your natal chart, that energy issue that I've been referring to with Saturn could have been magnified by that. So great news that Neptune's direct. Neptune's still influential, however, but your ruler Venus moves also on the 7th into a fantastic location. This is something to truly celebrate, Libra, because Venus moves into your sister air sign of Aquarius, but applies to Pluto. If you have been yearning for a really significant romantic or social situation in your life for some time, this really gives you a lot of propulsion. Also, from the 10th through to the 15th, Venus and Mars are in an opposition. Despite Mars's retrograde, is there one person in your circle who's capturing your imagination a lot more? Whether you're in a relationship and therefore you're connecting to this person as a couple, or it is more of a one-to-one thing, there could be a lot of chemistry which can make your pulse race. What's not to like about that? That's absolutely lovely. However, the full moon of the 15th does occur in your sister air sign of Gemini, but it is going to be squaring up with Neptune. So what we've got is that third house energy that you start this month with the new moon, very much about those quick, sharp communications, but with Mercury retrograde. On the 15th, Mercury goes direct. We'll take that, but we have the full moon with Neptune creating the potential for distortion around communications. So as much as you will get some people saying, well, all your problems are over, Mercury's going direct, you need to be, again, cutting through the mist, which is Neptune, using the energy of Saturn, which is more exacting, to get to what's really important to you. But on the 21st, the winter solstice sees the sun move into its annual transition into Capricorn, which for you is very much about home, family, emotion. If you are craving, after quite a bright and playful and sociable December, to get nearer to home and hearth and spend time with the people who really mean a lot to you, then this winter solstice will help you to get in touch with it. But it is in a T-square with the nodal axis. Balancing some of your personal desires around relationships with what some family commitments, needs or expectations could be part of the complex picture. We also have on the 24th, Christmas Eve, a peaking again of a long-standing square between Jupiter and Saturn. If you recall, on the 19th of August this occurred. Because the alliance between these two, or the connections between these two, are relatively rare because they have such different ways of circulating around our solar system, they last came together in a conjunction in 2020. So this square that occurred on the 19th of August, being repeated on Christmas Eve, sees Jupiter retrograde in the part of your situation that's to do with breaking out, thinking of travel, for example. If you want to get away over the festivities for some sun or snow, wouldn't be a surprise. But again, the details will be important because Saturn's a more restraining and containing influence. But what Jupiter may also be making you aware of is any resentments that you've been feeling that have been long rooted. Let's go back in the story to 212 when Neptune moved into 6. Since then, you've probably given so much in some way to others. It could be through your work, And then when Saturn arrived in March 23, that just amped up that demand, that low energy, and at times a feeling of overwhelm. So I feel that it's very, very important with that particular square on Christmas Eve that you're really in touch with what you will or won't do for others. And the playful, charismatic energies at the heart of this month are just reminding you that as much as you've been very dedicated and conscientious, it is really important to enjoy life. And that's going to be a big part of Venus's transit through your sister air sign of Aquarius. But then, as the month draws to a close, your relationship sector is lit up with Chiron going direct. If you have got some hurts and healing to be had there, that will help. But also, Mars and Pluto come into a direct confrontation within 3 degrees. It's actually going to become exact on the 3rd of January, and it is mighty because that aspect is an aspect that needs to be used wisely. It's about power. It is about potentially using thrust, authority and force we're going to see in the wider world. In your particular situation, I think what Pluto's taught you since 2008 is that at times you have to say no. You are the ultimate person that likes to keep the peace and you love fairness. But if things have become intolerably unfair, particularly around the family dynamic, you might find yourself, even with all this good stuff feeding in this month, much more assertive and much more outspoken, and if so, good for you. And if you want to discover what year 2025 will hold for you in terms of your sun, ascendant or moon, please do click on the link within this video where you can watch my deep dive video for you. But as this year comes to an end, we can celebrate with another new moon. So it's a black moon, 2 new moons in the same month, but the last one's in that sector of emotion. So all the lessons that you've learned with Pluto, with Saturn and Neptune, with Uranus as well in your 8th house, the things you need to really break free from that perhaps have been addictive but not very good for you. As you come to the end of this year and see in the new year, I really wish you a happy Christmas and a peaceful New Year celebration. But as you go into this new year, I think it's going to be with a lot of life experience and determination from all the planetary influences that you've gained so much from, at times in quite a painstaking and painful way over the last few years, but you're really set fair to explode into the new year. Take care, Libra, all the best and goodbye. Welcome, Scorpio, to your in-depth monthly forecast for December 2024 for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. If you order your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast, you also get your life roadmap report, 30% off, but also my free gift of your zodiac general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast for the coming year. Please see the link below for more. The personal forecast is totally unique to each person it's produced for and will give you searing insights for the next year. You'll get the rest of 24 free. On the screen now, I'm showing your event chart right at the start of the month. We need to be mindful of your traditional ruler, Mars. Mars starts this month in a glorious alliance to the moon, but also to the North Node. The moon is applying to the sun right at the start of the month as we reach into the new moon in Sagittarius. But the position of Mars for you is very much to do with authority. So if you're wanting to raise your profile professionally, apply for a job, do a presentation, that link back to that new moon right at the start of the month from Mars is really going to embolden you. And what about the North Node? Well, the North Node is your sixth sense. It's a guiding principle, pulling you towards just the right practical opportunity where you can demonstrate your authority, your your talent and your drive with the help of Mars, but also get what you deserve in terms of the rewards, the new moon in your sector of everyday money. But what about Pluto? Pluto's your modern ruler, your higher octave ruler, and that starts this month in the sign of Aquarius, and it's going to be coming into an opposition with Mars over the last 3 days of the month, and that is a mighty event. So I will go through that with you shortly. But also at the start of the month, Mercury, the planet of communication, like the moon and the sun, is in Sagittarius. But of course it is in retrograde. So if you have been finding it a little bit of a struggle to get money paid to you that's owed since the 26th of November when the retrograde began, or from the 7th of November when the pre-retrograde shadow began, not a complete surprise. But we need to think Mercury outside just the prism of money, because the second house can be how we think about our value and self-worth. And it's possible that Mercury's retrograde has actually been very good for you, helping you to analyse where you might be able to approach things in a little bit of a different way. And that reprise is also blessed by the exuberant energies of Jupiter right at the start of this month. So Jupiter in your 8th house of long-term finance, Mercury in the 2nd house of everyday money are in an opposition. But of course they're both located in locations which makes them in detriment. But that mutual receptivity there could give you a sense of optimism that you are on the up in terms of your income, or at least getting a greater sense of your value from all the hard work you've been investing, and that's a really good thing. What's not to like? Well, of course, the Christmas period can be a time when we can have extra costs, and we can also be tempted to be very generous to the people that we love. And perhaps if there is one qualifying factor at the start of this month on those Sagittarian positions, it is Saturn. So Saturn is the planet of structure, time, karma, but it has been in the 5th house for you since March 2023. And of course it did go through its long 20-week retrograde. So it's just coming out of that, but it is broadly squaring up with both the square between Jupiter and Mercury and also the new moon. So however much you set your intentions at the start of this month, you can blow a hole in them if you're wanting to be a bit cannier about your resources by perhaps being a bit too free and easy with your finance. So Saturn's basically saying to you, look, if you're caught up in getting your situation working as best you can with all the cost of living increases we've all been faced with, Saturn's just saying keep working at it, don't be too frivolous, because it could be something that you ultimately regret. But you know, right at the start of this month, Scorpio, you could have a dazzling conversation. You can be a little bit cautious. Of course, your observations on others can be very direct. But because Venus, the planet of relating, is in a very gracious part of your scope at the start of this month, your 3rd house, that gives you an added dimension tonally, even in terms of expressing your ideas, because of the warmth of Venus and the becomingness of Venus. Well, that's linking to Uranus in your sector of relating. Is there somebody that you're going to connect to in the first week of this month? It is entirely possible. That's an electric connection. Things can happen very quickly with Uranus in the mix. What about if you're rooted in a long-term relationship? Well, I feel that if finances are improving, or at least you're on the same page in working through the pressure that Christmas can create, I feel that the cazimi, which occurs on the 6th, where the Sun and Mercury are completely unified, because Mercury's in a retrograde, it's an inferior conjunction, the Sun glows up and magnifies the ability of Mercury. Mercury is the communicator, but it's also the planet of precision through its rulership of Virgo. So your ability to analyse your situation crisply is increased on that day. But also on that day, your traditional ruler Mars slams on the brakes. It's going to be in a retrograde through to the 23rd of February, but it's actually for you going to reverse back into your 9th house of exploration and adventure on the 6th of January. So if you had been thinking about flying off somewhere for some sun or snow, Mars perhaps is telling you at this stage, particularly with the retrograde, if there are some headwinds professionally, perhaps it's just trying to get everything organised to get through the festivities. Mars slowing down just is saying to you, use your assertion carefully and appropriately, particularly when he goes face to face with Pluto, because Pluto is in that 4th house of emotional this month, and that's where the big transformations are going to be through to 2043 initially, then 44, because of the brief sojourn of Pluto into Pisces in the interim. But on the 7th, Neptune, which has been giving you a lot of beguiling energy around your social and romantic and creative situations since 212, ends its long retrograde, which began on the 2nd of July. If you have felt uncertain, a bit confused around those areas of life, not a complete surprise. And of course, Saturn may have been applying some limitations or restrictions or demands that have made life quite complex. But on the same day, Venus moves to join up with Pluto in your 4th house. And as much as you may be focused on those practical financial strands at the start of this month, or you may be having that dazzling connection, that application of Venus to Pluto is going to make you mightily aware of who your connections are to key people in your world. It might not be romantic. It could be family members. It could be a friend. It could be someone that you're very close to who's a neighbour. Because what Venus and Pluto does is amps up the intensity of what we feel, because for you it's in house 4. Now if you are wanting to make some changes to your home, some home improvements, and that could be your focus through the winter sales, Venus being in the 4th house and being triggered by Pluto could give you a lot of a desire to make some last minute changes, perhaps before anyone actually turns up for Christmas if you're hosting, or visiting those stores and making those shrewd and canny purchases that can help you to create the home hub that really helps you to retreat and restore in the way that you need. But Venus and Mars do go into an opposition from the 10th to the 15th. That actually can give people more desire when it comes to romance and intimacy. But because Mars is in your 10th house, that's about leadership. It is in its retrograde, of course, by now. But Venus is saying stay in touch with your vulnerability. Because if you let that desire to show your strength through Mars dominate perhaps some of your sensitivities, maybe someone's not necessarily going to see the best of you. But the full moon, which occurs on the 15th, for you is in your sector of transformation. And if there is something that isn't quite working in your situation, as Mercury goes direct on the same day, but Neptune, despite going direct, is in a swirling, misty T-square to both the moon and the sun, there may be some confusion. So if you are in a relationship which isn't really working, and the pressure of Christmas is creating more dilemmas, as Jupiter and Saturn clash on Christmas Eve, it could bring all the politics to a peak. Think back to the 19th of August, that's when this last happened. It's going to happen next year on the 15th of June, but by that time Saturn will have moved briefly into Aries, Jupiter more positively into Cancer. However, the square here, Saturn in the 5th house, could be said to be a bit anti-joy. It's not really fair. What Saturn's saying is you need to really work at it, but also you need to know what you really want. Jupiter in the 8th house could be more, particularly in its retrograde, about the lusty side of things, the desire for intimacy. But if there is some kind of block that isn't really working, sadly, because of the time of year it is, it could become more obvious. And on the 21st, we did see the sun move into the sign of Capricorn, which speeds life up for you. This ushers in cardinal quadrant 4, a backdrop which lasts for 13 weeks through to the spring equinox. And the pace of life is going to be really fast for you in the early part of next year. Chiron also goes direct on the 29th. Now, the North Node, which does apply in a T-square to the winter solstice, is in Aries too. And for you, that is about your physical health, but it can also be about life organization. You might feel a little bit conflicted if there are different people who want you to spend time with them at different occasions for New Year, for example. Keeping all of the people happy all of the time may prove a little challenging, but I feel that if you have felt a bit under par with Chiron's retrograde, or it's felt that you've spent a lot of time supporting other people, a good moment to take a few days just to breathe. Then with the new moon in Capricorn, the black moon, the second of the month, on the 30th, what a glorious end to the year for you personally, because that really is going to speed things up. But the collision between Mars and Pluto reaches a higher point of intensity as the month comes to a close. If you want to discover what year 2025 will hold for you, please click on the link underneath this video and you can watch my deep dive, which really is very detailed. But I feel as this year comes to a close, just be aware that when this year began, Mercury was in a retrograde, and it was in your second house of everyday resources. So if you end this year still trying to work out exactly the right balance on the ins and outgoings of your finances, particularly with that full moon emphasizing that, and there's still a little bit of extravagance you could squeeze out of the equation because of Neptune being very much to do with temptation in house 5, well, that may be something you can reflect on. But I feel that what you can also do is communicate how you feel, because with Venus and Pluto in your 4th house, you really are being set up to demonstrate a much greater connection to your own inner world. And although you can be very canny, shrewd, and also have a penetrating ability to see what other people are doing, I feel as you're going into this new year, if you can apply those talents to your own inner world, that's going to be a huge area of growth in year 2025. Have a great Christmas and New Year. All the best, Scorpio, and goodbye. Welcome Sagittarius to your in-depth monthly forecast for December 2024 for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. If you order your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast, you also get your life roadmap report 30% off, but also my free gift of your zodiac general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast for the coming year. Please see the link below for more. The personal forecast is totally unique to each person it's produced for and will give you searing insights for the next year. You'll get the rest of 24 free. You're one of the zodiac's most dynamic characters. Yet over the last couple of years, Saturn, which is very much to do with containment and steadiness, has been applying to the part of your situation which is to do with your home, emotion and security. So this month begins with a glorious new moon in your sign. On the screen now, I'm showing your event chart, and you can see the moon is making its way towards that connection to the sun, which will be on the 1st. But Saturn is in a broad right angle to that new moon. New moons are a fantastic opportunity to glow up, to demonstrate to people just how dynamic and dazzling we can be. If there is something new and fresh you want to start, you could do so, but also be mindful of the position of Mercury. Mercury's in a retrograde in your sign, suggesting that even if there are some ongoing strands that you're feeling uplifted by, just be conscious that they may require some modification along the way. But because Jupiter, your ruler, is in an opposition to Mercury, so we have two planets in locations where they're detrimented, both in retrograde, one of the things you don't want to do is overpromise and under-deliver. So this is where Saturn can really be very protective. So whether it's a new relationship, a job, an interest, a hobby you want to showcase, anything where you really want to demonstrate your flair and creativity, just factor in a little bit of protective caution. It may not be your natural way of approaching things, but this is what Saturn has been teaching you since March 2023. But what about that retrograde at the start of this month? Might it be that you're rethinking something that was seeming to take a giant step forwards? Well, if that happens, do be philosophical about it, because when you end up at your destination, it's not really how you got there that's going to count, because sometimes circumstances change which inform our decision making. So just go with it. You can be extremely good at being a flexible person, and that part of your nature can certainly be an asset at the start of this month. But I also want to make you mindful of the position of Mars. Now, Mars is going to slam on the brakes on the 6th, but it starts this month in a vibrant angle to the moon in your sign, but also the north node in the sign of Aries. So we have a grand fire trine. If ever there was a time to demonstrate your passion and enthusiasm, it's certainly now, as long as you're aware of Mercury's opposition to Jupiter and with both of them in retrograde. And of course, Jupiter's in the part of your situation to do with relationships, but relationships can take many forms, whether it's with our friends, colleagues, family members, neighbours, or perhaps in a more personal context. But Jupiter is going to be in that relating sector for you right through to the 9th of June next year, but is going to be broadly connecting to Saturn in a moderating way right through this month, and particularly on Christmas Eve. The reason I'm telling you this is obviously this is a festive month and we want to have fun and enjoy ourselves. But if you recall, on the 19th of August, they squared up then. They're also going to square up next year on the 15th of June. By that time, Jupiter will have moved forwards into the sign of Cancer, and Saturn will be in a brief transit through Aries. But this particular one on Christmas Eve just makes you mindful that something from your past, it could be that you're going to hear from someone, and that person may be someone that you do have a kinship with, but there could be some kind of complication. Perhaps they live too far away. Perhaps they're not free to connect with you. Perhaps their situation is limited by family responsibilities, or perhaps it's going to be yours. So Saturn, along with Neptune in the sign of Pisces, are very influential this month. So as much as that new moon right at the start of the month can certainly give you a lot of extra confidence and drive, just stay mindful of what the potential pitfalls can be. Not to be negative, not to self-doubt, but actually to be realistic. Now on the 6th, there is a glorious event. It's a cazimi, a Mercury cazimi. This is when the retreating Mercury meets the advancing Sun. It's an inferior conjunction because Mercury's in retrograde through to mid-month, but it does give you a chance to rethink something or be flexible. You have a gift for being mutable, and that ability to just shift is actually a real asset, but you could see something in a completely fresh way on that day. But what about the Mars retrograde? This occurs every 2 years, and this year Mars is going to start off, as it is now, in the sign of Leo for 9 weeks. It's going to come back into Leo on the 18th of April, because on the 6th of January, Mars will invert back into the passionate 8th house for you. But the 9th house can be about adventure, very much in keeping with the energies of your sign, can be about independence, freedom, but critically about travel. But Mars, of course, can be a very impatient influence. So you could find that something that's very important to you that gets primed up at the start of this month could slow down a little bit, or you may find that your philosophies or viewpoints could come into conflict with someone else's, particularly from the middle and towards the end of this month. But I will share more about that shortly. But if you have felt at times since the start of July a little bit overwhelmed or underpowered, or even very emotional, it may be because of Neptune's retrograde. Neptune goes forwards after 42% of the year in a rewind, and as it does, I feel this can help to ease things a little bit, but clarity is still going to be at a premium, even through the third week of this month. But the great thing that you have on the 7th is that Venus moves into the part of your situation which is to do with how you think, but also how you express your ideas. But as she does, she applies to Pluto. You could find yourself having a very intense conversation, but it could be one that's heartfelt. Sometimes I think people can perceive Sagittarian people as being so invested in their need for freedom and space that it's difficult for them to really focus on one particular person. And it is possible that this connection could lead to some very interactive encounters that could be very playful and even flirty. But when we put Pluto in the mix, it can leverage up the weight of how we forge our bonds or how we share information. And of course, Venus can also be about money. If you are involved in any kind of technology project, this could be a really important phase. In fact, from the 10th through to the 15th, Venus meets the retreating Mars. Now, when those two are in opposition, it can create a lot of attraction power. If there is someone that you encounter that you find very lively, has a spirited personality, that could really make your pulse race. But it's also the case that in an existing relationship, if you do have very different belief systems or even values, or your need to be free or to have your own friends, all of those strands could get in the way of intimacy. The 15th sees Mercury go direct in your sign, but just be aware it won't come out of its post-retrograde shadow until the early part of December, meaning that that elusive traction that I was talking about earlier still could see and require you to maintain that flexible approach. But stay with it. Remember, wherever you end up is wherever you were meant to be. But the full moon on the same day is in your opposite sign of Gemini. Now, the third, ninth house energy of those two really could see that whole dynamic about different ideas come to the fore. It's just because Neptune is T-squaring them. So in other words, Neptune forges a 90-degree angle to the moon, but also the sun. That means there could be some sensitivity, or your uncertainties about where you stand within yourself, about how you feel about someone, could come up and you could feel very sensitive. However, on the 21st, the sun moves into Capricorn, ushering in Cardinal Quadrant 4. Western tropical astrology is predicated on the seasons, so we have 4 lots of 13-week periods. Now for you, right through to the spring equinox on the 20th of March, what you're going to be searching for is building up the foundations of your world and making sure that your financial picture is really stable. But this particular winter solstice also T-squares with the nodal axis, which actually is activating a very playful part of your chart, and one that's very much to do with living in the moment. But if you are someone who can be very speculative and on the front foot when it comes to interesting ideas, that winter solstice is just saying to you, a bit like Saturn, proceed with a degree of caution. Ironically, on the 29th, Chiron, the so-called wounded healer, in your sector of romance does end a retrograde. If you have felt that a past hurt or some inhibitions have been preventing you from really relaxing and being in the moment, I feel that Chiron going direct will surely help. But then we do have Mars and Pluto in a direct opposition. Is there someone in your friendship circle who you are finding or set to find really very hard to resist? Or could it be that someone's going to be very aggravating? Mars opposite Pluto is very much about power, and it could be you're going to encounter someone that you can feel powerless around, or they may feel that you hold too much power. Perhaps it won't be quite as extreme as that. Perhaps it could be something more subtle, certainly about the more sociable side of the celebrations. So as the curtain comes down on this year, and if you want to check out your year 2025 deep dive Sagittarius forecast, please see the link beneath this video. But the new moon on the 30th is in Capricorn, which is an echo of that winter solstice. But this actually is a new moon, apart from that opposition between Mars and Pluto, which is not impeded. So if you do want to improve your circumstances in a practical way as you go into the new year, there is a very strong opportunity for you to do that. So this is a month to stay very much in touch with how you feel. There could be some dazzling encounters, some exciting social interaction. Just be aware that how you feel is not necessarily a weakness or a vulnerability, it's how it is. And being in tune with that will position you in just the right way to lean into the opportunities and excitement that are coming. Have a great Christmas, Happy New Year, and goodbye. Welcome Capricorn to your in-depth monthly forecast for December 2024 for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. If you order your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast, you also get your life roadmap report, 30% off, but also my free gift of your zodiac general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast for the coming year. Please see the link below for more. The personal forecast is totally unique to each person it's produced for and will give you searing insights for the next year. You'll get the rest of 24 free on the screen now. I'm showing your event chart right at the start of the month. You have a cluster of energy you can see, including the moon and the sun, the two luminaries, in your 12th house, in preparedness for the new moon, which occurs on the first day. Now there is going to be a new moon in your sign. It's a black moon, which occurs on the 30th. That's when we get two new moons within the same month, which is a very rare thing. But you start this month with that emphasis on that private healing, and in some ways more cautious part of your chart. 12th house new moons can often arouse parts of our situations we're not necessarily keen to look at. So things to do with past hurts, perhaps loss. We could feel very nostalgic for someone from our past, particularly of course with this time of year. But the key is Mercury really in that 12th house, because that can lead to mixed messages, misunderstandings, or anxieties going around our minds that aren't necessarily based in fact. Now, you have a great gift that your ruler Saturn is the steady eddy of the zodiac. But Saturn's in the part of your situation, along with Neptune, that's very much to do with how you think. And there, particularly Saturn at the start of the month, Saturn's applying to that position of the moon, the sun, but also Mercury in a broad T-square. What does that mean? The T-square between Saturn and Jupiter, for example, reaches a peak on Christmas Eve. Well, essentially, the opposition between Mercury and Jupiter can actually be quite jolly, but it could also see you do too much to support someone else's situation. So your sensitivity, kindness and compassion could be invested in the right way in the run-up to Christmas, and that can give you a lot of personal satisfaction and be truly appreciated by the right person. So if you do something for a good cause, someone who is genuinely less fortunate, you'll be surfing this energy magnificently. But if you've got expectations around certain people in your everyday world, could be neighbours, could be some friends, someone somewhere unfortunately may not actually meet them. And the reason for that is that someone actually could have a view of you that they're not expressing openly, because the 12th house in traditional astrology can be about secret enemies. Now, I don't want you to think that you've got people there plotting against you, but I do feel it's important, say for example at work, to make sure that what you do in terms of processes, you're really precise and careful. You don't get distracted, because when the swirling mist of the 12th house is engaged in our situations, it can see us a bit confused or a little bit weary. And one of the great ways to deal with the start of this month is to give yourself permission, despite the fact that Venus is in your sign, forging a very charismatic link to Uranus. Even if there is opportunities to go out and play and socialise and join in the social milieu, just be very selective about who you open up to. So if you are talking to someone you work with and it is to do with a festive gathering, if there are some sensitive strands about how you feel about the boss or the work you do, I'd keep them pretty close to your chest, unless you're absolutely sure that the person you're opening up to is someone you can count on. So those are the kind of situations you need to be mindful of. But also, just as the energies for Christmas are building up, there may be part of you that would rather actually have some time alone. And that can create some issues, because people may feel that you're not really being fun, you're not joining in, and they may feel that that's a little bit uncharacteristic. When you were younger, the chances are you were a little bit more serious. And I think it's that side of your nature that could come up. But if you are involved in good deeds, you have particular charities or causes that mean a lot to you, the chances are you're going to be very active in order to try and meet your obligations in that regard. But if you do have a little bit of time for yourself, or you're just more selective about your social or romantic companions at the start of this month, you'll be surfing this energy well. Because the 12th house new moon is a chance to actually grow, a chance to gain a lot more knowledge about what makes you or others deeply tick. And that's where Saturn can come back to you, because that gives you that application, that hard working part of your nature. So if you read or discuss something that helps you to become more informed, particularly about the more psychological dimension, it can be a time for you to gain a lot more insight in a very positive way. And part of that process can reach a peak on the 6th with the Mercury Cazimi. This is when Mercury, in this case in retrograde, sits between the Sun and us on Earth. The Sun's energy radiates into Mercury, and Mercury in the 12th house helps us to dive down, to use the mental faculties of Mercury, but in a more penetrative way, to try to understand those motives that I was talking about before. If you did need to do some research, or perhaps go and see someone and have a private discussion, it could be a very powerful day. But also on the 6th, Mars, the planet of desire, thrust and action, goes into a retrograde. Mars goes into a retrograde every couple of years. He's going to be retracing his steps until the latter part of February, but he's actually going to invert back into your sector of relationships, and on the 6th of January, and is going to be there through to the 18th of April. So Mars inverting in the 8th house just suggests that when it comes to a very close connection, or perhaps even a sexual attraction, that you're just more conscious of slowing things down a little bit, unless you're really sure exactly where you stand. And because Venus, the planet of relating, forges that dynamic link with Uranus at the start of this month. There could be a huge attraction with someone. It may be even a confidential or secret liaison that shows itself at the start of this month. But if you're not quite sure, then just trim back. But also the 8th house can be about your long-term financial planning. If you're someone with interest in developing your own enterprise, your entrepreneurship, that also is something that could just slow down a little bit through to the latter part of February. But on the 7th, a really good news story. Neptune, the planet of dreams, but also the planet of healing and sensitivity, ends a long retrograde. If since the start of July you have felt at times a little bit confounded or unsure about certain connections or ideas, a little bit more clarity can come through. Unfortunately, it is going to be challenged a little bit in week 3, but I'll go into that shortly. On the 7th too, Venus moves out of your sign into the sign of Aquarius. Now, Venus in Aquarius can be very detached, non-judgmental. Actually a great place for Venus to be over the festivities because it can be very friendly. But for you, its application to Pluto suggests something you have been working on a very long time, perhaps since as far back as 2008, has proved to be very elusive. In other words, perhaps you've invested a lot of yourself in trying to improve your financial situation with new ideas or schemes or approaches, but haven't really seen the tangible evidence of a breakthrough you could do right at the heart of this month. But equally, if there is a complication developing in a romantic alliance, the fact that Venus goes opposite the retreating Mars from the 10th through to the 15th could make that situation very political, but also very hard to resist. So there could be someone who's going to make your pulse race fast right at the heart of this month. Which brings us to the 15th, because Mercury ends its retrograde, but it doesn't come out of its post-retrograde shadow until the early part of January. So there could still be a little bit of uncertainty or a lack of confidence, or you may feel unsure about someone's loyalty, or trust could be an issue still, but it will ease. But also on the same day we have a full moon. A full moon for you in a very practical part of your chart. Now, if there are things that you need to do for other people over the festivities, if you have to take a little bit more responsibility for some practical strands, you could find yourself thinking about those. But also because of the opposition to the Sun in your 12th house and the swirling mistiness of Neptune, this is why Neptune going direct is not going to be a panacea. If there are any office politics or work-based politics that you're finding rather difficult to deal with, that can just seem to be an even greater thing. But the 21st is really something for you to celebrate. The Sun moves into your sign. You're going to feel a surge of energy, but also a sense of greater certainty. Your self-belief will increase. Now, this also ushers in Cardinal Quadrant 4, the last 13-week period of the year. Yours is a cardinal sign. So your quality is action, authority, it's an executive energy. And that is going to show itself. But just be mindful that some tender home, emotional, or even work-based issues may in some ways contrast with what you need to do for yourself. Why? The winter solstice clashes with the nodal axis. The 29th, however, is a very positive day. Chiron, along with the North Node, Chiron's been in a retrograde in your 4th house. So when the North Node inverted into Aries in the middle of July 2023, since then you may have found yourself thinking a lot about your emotional roots, family issues, anything to do with your conditioning, but most of all your need for peace and security and tranquility. Chiron going direct is going to help that, but there is a very turbulent clash between Mars and Pluto as this month comes to a close. It's going to be exact on the 3rd of January. We're also going to have it in the latter part of April too, the 19th I think. But essentially Mars and Pluto are the two rulers of Scorpio. Scorpio is about change, transformation, but it can be quite forceful. So here there could be some kind of leverage going on. Maybe it's about that rather evocative relationship that's stirring up a lot of energies within you. Perhaps it's just about a stubborn standoff between you and someone you're close to. Maybe they feel that you're being a little too controlling. Maybe it's you who feels they're being too controlling. There can be some definite push and pull as this month draws to a close, but the new moon in your sign, the black moon on the 30th, is a glorious way to bring down the curtain on this year, because if you go back to the start of 2024, Capricorn, Mercury was in retrograde. It was also in your 12th house. It was also conjunct Mars, but it was also conflicted by the dreamy, drifting energies of Neptune. So that insecurity that you may have experienced more recently could have been something that's figured quite a lot over the last year. But I feel that with Pluto having left your sign and forging that link with Venus at the heart of this month, that's really encouraging you to have belief in your values, what makes you special, and your self-worth. And because of the new moon in your sign at the end of this month, doesn't have any outright difficult energies applying to it itself, it's definitely a time to set your intentions for how you burst into the new year and really have maximum confidence in what you want to achieve, because I feel that you are going to burst into 2025 in a very dynamic way. To discover what next year will hold for you, please check out my deep dive video by clicking on the link underneath this video. But just making you aware finally of the 24th of December, because on that day your ruler Saturn does square off with Jupiter. So there could be some tension there, perhaps actually by trying to be a little bit too virtuous. If other people offer to take some of the weight off your shoulders in terms of the festive arrangements, let them. Because you'll need perhaps to try your hardest to do the right thing actually won't necessarily be particularly helpful. So it's a time just to relax as much as you can, accept that there will be some tensions. That's just part and parcel of the Christmas period. But there is an opportunity with Venus in the second house to enjoy all the traditional features of this time of year. Have a lovely Christmas, a happy new year, and goodbye for now. Welcome Aquarius to your in-depth monthly forecast for December 2024 for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. If you order your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast, you also get your life roadmap report 30% off, but also my free gift of your zodiac general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast for the coming year. Please see the link below for more. The personal forecast is totally unique to each person it's produced for and will give you searing insights for the next year. You'll get the rest of 24 free. On the screen now, Aquarius, you can see your event chart right at the start of the month. And with the moon applying to the sun in the sign of Sagittarius, for you, that's your sector of sociability. But it's also the part of your horoscope to do with your highest values and also your long-term plan. So the new moon on the first day of this month gives you a glorious opportunity to really supercharge whatever it is that's really exciting you. And there can be a lot of enthusiasm because Mercury, the planet of thinking, although it's retrograde, is in an opposition with Jupiter, the planet of positivity and good fortune. Now, although they're both detrimented in each of the signs they're in, for you, this certainly can give you an extra sense of zest and bubbliness. But that new moon certainly is a chance to set your intentions And also because you are someone who takes friendships usually very seriously. That's an area of your situation which can come back to you in an extremely dramatic way from the 7th of this month, when Venus, the planet of relating, arrives in your sign but applies to Pluto. What a combination. What's not to like? Well, it's just that your traditional ruler Saturn is saying that when it comes to the money and when it comes to your values, you could find yourself having to, in some ways, bend a little bit in terms of what you'd really like. So you can be very idealistic, but the reality of your situation means that there could be some judgment calls that you need to make. Why is this? Well, despite the fact that Mars and the North Node are applying in a tremendously vibrant ways to the new moon at the start of the month, which certainly can give you a lot of assertion through Mars, but also help you to express your ideas through the North Node. Essentially, Saturn has, since March 2023, been asking you to reimagine some of your approach to your everyday situation. Now, it may be that income has been a little bit harder to find. Costs have certainly gone up for many of us, but it's just that part of you that has got the big picture very firmly in mind may just need to adapt to that harsh reality that sometimes modern life supplies. And that could come through the guise of Saturn, because it broadly squares to the new moon, but also it T-squares to Mercury and Jupiter too. But on the 6th of this month, we do have a cazimi, a Mercury cazimi, and that's going to help you to cut through the mist, because the cazimi is going to see the sun radiate its energy into the energies of Mercury and give you an opportunity to be very precise, which can be a Mercury quality, one that can be lacking a little bit in Sagittarius, which can be a bit see the big picture, struggle with the details, but I feel you will find it easier on that day. But just be aware that then Mars does begin a retrograde, one which is going to go on through to the 25th of February, but it is going to invert into your sector of work, physical vitality and welfare from the 6th of January. But that's not a bad thing, because if you set some intentions, some New Year's resolutions towards the end of this year, the chances are Mars is going to help you to deliver them early in January. But Mars going retrograde in your sector of relating means that you're perhaps going to need to rethink certain alliances, perhaps even be a little stronger on your boundaries, or perhaps bend into the needs of other people a little bit more. The reason for this is that although Neptune goes direct on the 7th, and that's been creating some blurry energy about money too, on the 7th too, Venus, as I mentioned before, arrives in your sign, but immediately goes face to face with Mars. Don't be surprised, therefore, if you do have some kind of relationship dilemma. Part of it could be, if you're single, that more than one person is truly fascinating you. But in a committed relationship, that part of you that can be very individualistic needs to understand that at times there will be the needs of your partner, and they could assert those needs in a much more powerful way, particularly from then, but especially at the end of the month when Mars and Pluto go face to face. It's a big energy for us all, to be honest, because the opposition between Mars and Pluto can give us enormous willpower, a great deal of strength and determination, and a desire to get what we want, but we have to use that power wisely. Unfortunately, even if you're someone who tends to be very fair-minded and democratic in your approach, you could encounter someone who makes big demands on you. How will this play out? Well, that depends on your unique circumstances for sure. But if you are born right at the start of Aquarius, I feel Venus arriving to apply to Pluto at that point will give you a lot of extra charisma. And that could be really exciting, whether it's in terms of expressing creative and artistic flair and talent, or in terms of how you interact socially or romantically. But the 15th sees a full moon in your sister air sign of Gemini. And you could find yourself spoilt for choice at this part of the month and not quite sure exactly where you should head in terms of your time, energy, and interest. And part of the reason for that is Neptune, despite it going forwards, is in a square to that full moon. So it could be a situation that whatever you do, it seems that it's not entirely clear. How can you deal with that? Well, I feel that by the 21st, when the sun arrives in Capricorn, and also we have the winter solstice, of course, and the ushering in of cardinal quadrant 4, that is going to forge a T-square to the nodal axis. So there could be some thinking that you need to do, and if you do retreat a little bit through the last week of this year, despite the social opportunities there could be, don't beat yourself up about that. You may need some time to digest some of the politics of your situation, which could be shown up by the square between Jupiter in the part of your chart that's very much to do with having fun and joyfulness, and Saturn in that second house. So even if you do want to be very spontaneous, perhaps quite speculative, perhaps even very generous, I feel Saturn and latterly Neptune are asking you each time to go back to what is truly right for you in terms of your situation now. So if in the past you have been, the person who's been very much the player who's knitted everyone together in a group situation, or bailed people out, or spoilt people with the level of your generosity, I think you need to put your energies into your talents at this time, but balanced in a way with what works for you in a practical financial sense, but also what you feel comfortable with those values, because this could be a month when some of your idealism is in some ways checked by the punishing realism of life. But that brings us to the 29th, when Chiron goes direct. If you have found at times, particularly since Chiron's been in Aries the last few years, that you don't always feel heard, Chiron going direct will certainly help that. But because Mars is in your opposite sign and it is opposing Pluto, again, if you're early born Aquarius, you're going to feel much more powered up, much more authoritative, and that could feel really good. But if you're further into Aquarius, it may feel that some politics are in your situation. But the new moon, which occurs on the 30th, really asks you to see in the new year, being very conscious of what your deeper needs are. And sometimes at this part of the year, Aquarius people, despite your reputation for being very bubbly, sociable and clubbable, can need some moments of peace, quiet and tranquility. So be selective about who you spend time with over the festivities. I think that's really the advice. And then as you burst into the new year, certainly once Mars moves back into Cancer, that's going to give you the opportunity to focus on any strand that you see as being important in terms of being a little bit more disciplined or virtuous early in the new year. But having Pluto in your sign for the long term and using its power to bless the energy of Venus means that if you do have a particular quality that you don't feel has really reached an audience in the way you want, this is definitely a time to find all of your resources in order to dig in and use that energy and that grit to make sure that you're letting the maximum people know just how talented, creative and individualistic you truly can be. If you've yet to watch your year 2025 deep dive video, please see that underneath this video, Aquarius. But for now, take care, all the best, have a great Christmas and a very happy new year. Welcome Pisces to your in-depth monthly forecast for December 2024 for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. If you order your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast, You also get your life roadmap report, 30% off, but also my free gift of your zodiac general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast for the coming year. Please see the link below for more. The personal forecast is totally unique to each person it's produced for and will give you searing insights for the next year. You'll get the rest of 24 free. On the screen now, I'm showing your event chart right at the start of the month. The big takeout is that we've got 2 new moons this month. The first on the first day is in your sector of success. The second, the black moon on the 30th, is in the part of your chart that's to do with sociability. What perfect timing to see in the new year. But right at the start of this month, as the moon, as you can see from your chart, applies to the sun, there's also a link between Mars, in part of your chart to do with physical energy and stamina, but also the North Node in the part of your chart to do with your self-worth. Now, they're linking back to that worldly interaction that's going to be addressed by the new moon on the 1st. So you've got it all there to go for, at least on the face of it, Pisces. Because the 2 most influential planets this month are both in your sign. Yes, I know that Pluto's moved into the 12th house, and I know that Venus is going to connect to it around the 7th when Venus moves into Aquarius, which could have implications for your love life. But when it comes to that worldly interaction, raising your profile, receiving acclaim, attention, gaining traction for your talents and skills, gaining greater success, then I feel that it's all down to how you value you. Because Saturn, since March 2023, has been squeezing the pips in your situation. You may not have enjoyed the best vitality, but what Saturn's been asking you to do is to focus on what's really essential, to simplify your life. If you've done that, made yourself a bit leaner and a bit fitter, and put the focus on the things that are really important, Saturn will not inhibit you in quite the same way. If you're still trying to juggle things, particularly because Neptune, your ruler, also in your sign since 2012, is going to be influential too this month, but just in a different way. That's the part of you that could be a little bit dreamy, maybe a little idealistic, perhaps even a little impractical as other people see you, not how I see you. Because Pisces people, this archetype, that you're very drifting and dreamy and escapist and very compassionate, it's not as simple as that. Every single individual person has unique qualities and strengths, and you actually have the ability of flexibility. Also, you can sit deep in situations and observe what goes on and not necessarily react to them. So this is a month right from the off when Saturn applies in a square broadly to the new moon, but also in a T-square critically to your traditional ruler Jupiter. And Jupiter starts this month in a retrograde. Does that mean you're going to be unlucky? No, but it does mean that you're likely to be quite invested in your emotional needs or your family life, and that's really important. Why not? But just at a time when there's that big cluster of energy right at the top of your chart urging you to seize the prize. So because Saturn is moderating the exuberance of Jupiter all through this month, and precisely on Christmas Eve, this could be a time when the golden prize could slip by you if you pause, you doubt yourself, you're unsure, you're not quite clear on your strategy, or you can't get your ideas across, even if they are imaginative, artistic, creative, or different, in a way that other people feel fits in with the structure that they expect, not what you want. So there may be some bending that you need to do, but that's where your talent for survival can come in, because you're mutable. But just be aware, if you're doubting yourself, or your physical circumstances are preventing you from really focusing in the way quite that you'd like, and to be honest, that is really life for most of us. We rarely have everything lined up exactly as we'd like. It's more making the most of what we've got, and there could be a bit of that this month. But if you can free your mind or free your soul, Neptune, if you can free your physical energy, Saturn, to focus on what's really important, that interview, that application, that presentation you do could give you tremendous uplift and radiance and the ability to draw people to you. And all of it's going to come up to the boil on the 6th with the Mercury Cazimi. If there is a letter, an email that you're sending, a conversation you're having, particularly with someone influential, you could punch your ideas across really very well. Also, right at the start of this month, Venus begins the month in a very sociable area, in a very electric, but also really lovely link with Uranus. It's one of those energies that if you are a bit more spontaneous, or there's a zany part of your nature, or you encounter someone who's a bit different, as long as you have the confidence to be totally authentically yourself, something good can come from it. Very often the people who burst through and have success are not the people who are really on the program. They're the people who really are completely invested in being totally individual. But most of us have quite a lot of fear about doing that. Fear of being judged, fear of not quite meeting the conditions. All of that comes from our early childhood, really. But if you've got the confidence and the drive to say how you feel and mean it, then that's going to be very compelling. What about Mars going retrograde on the 6th? Well, to be honest, it is going to be heading back into an almost direct opposition with Pluto by the end of the month. If there are any politics in your situation, you're going to need the vibe of Mars to survive them, because Mars is giving you extra resilience. But because it's retrograde, it's just saying if you are going to be being more playful this month, and the chances are that is going to be from the time of the winter solstice, because before then I think your focus is much more on getting that balance between home and those professional or worldly hopes, which are glowing up so powerfully this month. So Mars is just saying, you know, be virtuous, get to bed early if you can, be aware if you're going to have a drink or two with the festivities, make sure you get the water in. If you are someone who has to be a little bit more careful about what you eat and drink, we all know if you go to functions, there are things there that might have the odd thing that doesn't quite agree with us, and that's where the discipline comes in. Fortunately, your ruler Neptune goes direct on the 7th. If you have felt that some of those individual hopes have wavered a little bit since early July, wouldn't be a surprise, because obviously Saturn was going retrograde until last month on the 15th. So all of those energies may have depleted you a little bit, but critically on the 7th, Venus does pitch up in Aquarius. Now Venus is very friendly, non-judgmental, maybe a little bit zany in the sign of Aquarius, but the 12th house and applying to Pluto is interesting. If in a romantic context you don't feel that your partner either supports you enough around home and emotional and family issues or the children, but at the same time neither really applauds you on and cheers you on in terms of your worldly pursuits, it really could bite in a deep way on the 7th, around that time, as Venus and Pluto come together. But equally, you can have a fascination with someone that burns hot from that point. Is it someone that maybe you've got a secret connection to, a secret observation of? Or is it someone that you've known before? Because the potential for some kind of reconnection is very, very strong, but also the potential for politics around the relationship. So just be aware of that. But if something isn't working in a current tie, it could be tested. It could be tested at that point and also towards the end of this year. But one of the things that is going to happen with the full moon on the 15th, Mercury goes direct on that day. So some of the work things that you've been waiting to hear about can get clarified. It's still going to be in its post-retrograde shadow until early January. The problem with the full moon it's not the full moon in itself of balancing the work-life thing, because that's really the theme of this month, together with making sure that your role in the middle, the pivot, means that you get heard or felt or seen emotionally, or heard or felt or seen professionally. The real issue is Neptune, because Neptune's in a T-square to that full moon. And you could find yourself doubting and perhaps double guessing yourself, not quite trusting in your instincts. Try to avoid that. Try to stay in touch with all the lessons that Saturn's been teaching you about simplifying things, but also being more direct, thorough, going in processes. The winter solstice on the 21st is a chance to get some light relief, because the Sun returns to Capricorn. It ushers in cardinal quadrant 4, the last 13-week period of the astrological year. And for you, it also can see you find your voice. If someone does need holding to account, you do need to ask some searching questions, you can do it then. But it could also be that because you may need to break out, perhaps do something spontaneously, perhaps even travel, because of the T-square to the nodal axis, there could be a cost to that, and you could find yourself not quite sure whether to invest in that need for escapism or not. But if you do head off for some winter sun or snow, it could on the whole be very good for you. Also, Chiron goes direct on the 29th. If you have had a narrative going on within you that you're not quite valuable enough, Chiron going direct will help. But the new moon, which occurs, the black moon, the second new moon of the month on the 30th, really can supercharge your desire to escape things that are oppressive. The problem is that Mars and Pluto are almost exactly opposite, which is as highly charged as one can possibly get. Pluto in your 12th house could reveal, even to yourself, some uncomfortable truths. On the other hand, there may be some practical realities and obligations that you feel you have to see through. You could feel really conflicted, so that need to perhaps escape, even, dare I say, run away from the oppressive situation could be very strong. Just be conscious of that. If you do head off somewhere that gives you that moment of interlude to see in the new year, that's wonderful, but just be conscious of how Jupiter came into that exact clash with Saturn on Christmas Eve. So if there are some politics around a family relationship as much as a romantic one, those could come up as much as anything to do with your work environment. So in general, as you end this year, I think you're thinking very much about needing some light relief, but it might not necessarily work out exactly as you need if you just do something spontaneously, if someone else feels that you're deserting your post, so to speak. So you could feel that sense of conflict as the year comes to a close. But the big picture, which is really important, Pisces, if you have a goal or ambition and you really want to focus on it and stay single-minded, it's a big opportunity this month. If you want to be more social, the opportunity for that comes through from the winter solstice, but there are still some complexities there. But in general, I feel you could find a part of you that needs to get in touch with your deepest feelings around your connections, and that could stir up, with Venus applying to Pluto, some senses of people who are no longer with us, someone you used to see years gone by. You could feel hugely nostalgic, which can be part of you anyway. So all of that can froth up from the 7th, but then the harsh reality of the situation may see you a bit angry or a bit disgruntled towards the end of the year, but that's when you can decide to be much more rebellious and do something for you rather than being the everlasting sacrificing soul. If you've yet to watch your year 2025 deep dive video, please see the link beneath this video. Have a great Christmas, a happy new year, good luck and goodbye.